Welcome, everybody. This is a committee of the whole meeting for the municipality of the County of Annapolis. I'll start with the roll call. District 1,
Bruce Prout.
District 2,
Brian Fuzzy Connell.
District 3 is Alan Parrish, myself. District 4,
Clyde Barlow.
District 5,
Lynn Longmire.
District 6,
That's Alex.
sorry.
District 6 was Alex.
Oh, that's right. District 7,
David Hudson.
District 8,
Michael Gunn.
District 9,
Wendy Sheridan.
District 10,
Brad Redden.
and District 11.
Diane LeBlanc, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much, everyone. Are there any disclosures of interest on any of the matters on the agenda today? Seeing none, I'll move along to the approval of the agenda. There are a few things that I'd like to add to the agenda that have just come up. Under 4.2, before we get into the business of the meeting, I'd like to raise an issue with respect to procedure. Under, at the end of new business, I'd like to add 6.12, a motion with respect to support for Ukraine. Under in camera, there's going to be 3 in-camera matters. One with respect to contract negotiations, one with respect to litigation, and one with respect to personnel. I don't have the section numbers of the Municipal Government Act directly in front of me, Madam Clerk.
Yeah, so you're adding C, personnel, and F, litigation or potential litigation.
And contract negotiations is already in there, right?
It's already on the agenda, yes.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by
So moved.
Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Redden.
Warden, I'd wanted to remove an item.
Okay,
What's that?
6.9, the withdrawal Lawrencetown Volunteer Fire Department. The motion is not relevant. We can't tell them to do anything.
Mr. Dick, this is coming from staff. Can you respond to Councillor Redden's comment?
I'll let Cheryl or Don respond to that.
why are we discussing it now and not keeping it on the agenda, if I may ask, Mr. Parrish or Warden Parrish?
Well, that's a good point. Shall we do that? Councillor Redden, are you all right with that?
I'm happy to leave it there and discuss it then, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor LeBlanc. There's a motion moved and seconded with respect to approval of the agenda. Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Next is the adoption of the minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting held on February 8th, 2022. Is there a motion in that regard?
Move to approve.
Moved by the Deputy Warden, seconded by Councillor Longmire. Discussion? I don't see any hands up. I don't hear any voices, so I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you for that. Next, with respect to procedure, I'd like to discuss the voting of the warden. Now, a warden in our system of government wears 2 hats. He's both a counselor and a warden. Last meeting, Councillor Connell raised the issue of whether the warden should leave the chair when speaking as a counselor. So I decided since then to research the issue. So I researched it only by a Google search. So my results aren't necessarily definitive. I also had a discussion with Mr. Dick about it. What I found is that with respect to how in a warden system of government, when a warden is speaking as a counselor, how that is conducted, I found it's all over the map. So the first place I went was our own policy with respect to the conduct of meetings. And it doesn't address the issue. There's no direction there. We do have a provision in our rules that if our rules don't apply, then you go to Robert's Rules of Order. So I went to Robert's Rules of Order. And Robert's Rules of Order essentially says that a chair doesn't speak, which isn't applicable to a situation where the chair is also a counselor in a warden sense of government. So then I decided that I would look at different municipalities that have a warden system of government. And I found that I found 5 of them where there's no direction at all. It doesn't address the issue. Inverness County, the District of Yarmouth, Victoria County, Richmond County, there's nothing there that I found that addresses the issue. Antigonish County might have, but that provision wasn't available on their website. I did find that there were some municipalities, both in Ontario and Nova Scotia, that addressed the issue. In Pictou County, the warden leaves the chair only while speaking to a motion, then resumes the chair. In Inverness County and the County of Peterborough in Ontario, a warden may speak on any matter from the chair, but if he or she makes a motion, he must relinquish the chair, which is the procedure I've been using so far, that if I make a motion, I leave the chair.
Point of order? Just a question.
Yeah,
This item is not on the agenda and we're speaking to it. We're not supposed to speak to things that aren't on the agenda.
it is on the agenda.
Is it? Did I miss that?
Yeah, we just added 4.2, speaking to a matter of procedure.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay, so
Proceed.
I was at the point of just in my research finding that a warden may speak on any matter from the chair. But if he makes a motion, he relinquishes the chair. In Oxford County in Ontario, the warden may speak on any question under consideration without leaving the chair. So I looked at all those different scenarios and I came to the conclusion that I would change my procedure. And it's not just mine, it's the warden, because I'm not always going to be the warden, that's for sure. So what I intend to do from now on is that if I'm wearing my hat as a counselor speaking to a motion, I'll leave the chair. If I'm wearing my hat as a warden, I'll speak from the chair. So I hope this isn't going to mess up the flow of the meetings. I think there are 2 advantages to this new system of what I'm trying to put in with respect to my commenting on motions. First, if somebody wants to make a point of order about something I'm saying while I'm speaking as a counselor, then there's someone else in the chair that can address the motion. Secondly, it makes it more clear to the public and to the counselors that when I'm speaking, whether I'm speaking as a counselor, as a warden. So today and in the future, the process I propose to use is that when I'm speaking to a motion as a counselor, I will say something to the effect of, I relinquish the chair. And then when I'm finished speaking to the motion, I'll go back into the chair. So that's what I propose to do from this point forward. And I trust that's fine with everybody in council. Councilor LeBlanc?
It's not a bad thought, and it probably could work. However, under the point of governance, if I recall, the chair or the warden or the mayor should not be the first to speak on any topic. It should be always, you should always be the last to speak. And by hearing all the other counselors. So what you're proposing, if I got it correct, is that you, if you wish to speak as a counselor, you would relinquish the chair to our deputy warden
Right.
and then put yourself in line with the other counselors to speak.
Yes,
Correct?
correct.
I'll leave it for now. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Councillor Connell?
Previous councils, when the warden wanted to speak, he stepped down from the chair. That doesn't mean he speaks at that moment. He's to be answered in sequence, same as any other counselor, because you're a counselor. And previous councils, when the warden stepped down as a chair, and a person took over the chair, the warden didn't step back into the chair until that discussion was finished. So there should be a little more research on that, because playing, dancing and jumping out of the chair just long enough to speak and then jumping back in isn't the answer.
Well, I can tell you that when I spoke to Mr. Dick about this, about my plan to change the procedure, he indicated that staff was currently working on changing the whole policy with respect to the conduct of council meetings, and that this would be on the agenda. So I can tell you, Councillor Connell, that staff is looking at this, and I anticipate maybe even next month that there might be a proposal coming from staff with respect to this very issue. I can tell you that I did think about that. The difficulty that I see, and you know, I didn't really intend to get into a debate on this today, because I think, you know, what I'm doing is I thought was going to be fine with everybody. But if the warden wants to speak as a counselor to a motion and leaves the chair for the discussion of the motion and puts the deputy warden in the chair, then if the deputy warden wants to speak to the motion, I guess he should leave the chair. And so then we have to pick somebody else on council to be in the chair if the deputy warden and the warden want to speak to it. And then that person may want to speak. So to me, you know, I have some difficulty with that. As I said, this procedure that I've seen, that I'm proposing, is one they use in Pictou County. I haven't seen any where the warden, the chair, leaves for the whole time of the motion, unless he's the person making the motion. That's what I saw in my research. But I do anticipate that staff will be commenting on this very shortly.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Warden?
Thank you very much. The other point, and I'm fine with your decision there, because it really is your decision. The other point I'd like to make, though, is that wardens don't usually vote unless they need it for a tiebreaker. And in a lot of cases, from what I've been told, I wasn't here when Reg Ritchie was, or the former warden, one of the former wardens, Reg Ritchie, was here. But they always said that Reg never voted unless it was needed for a tiebreaker, and very seldom spoke on an issue. He would let council figure that out. Thank you.
My understanding is that I'm required to vote as a counselor. That's my understanding.
All counselors are to vote on every question. The warden is a counselor. The warden votes on every question. He does not act as a tiebreaker ever.
But also, isn't a non-vote, isn't a non-vote considered a vote in the affirmative? So if he doesn't vote, it's an affirmative vote anyway.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Past practice for this council in the 25 years I've been here does not follow Robert's rules on this issue. An unvote, if someone abstains, it is counted in the affirmative, not the negative. Robert's rules want you to count it in the negative. Past practice for this council has been to count it in the positive in favor of whatever the motion is. We have been working on reviewing the procedures of council policy, and this has come up. If I can just maybe give you a sneak preview of what we've come to, or no, I won't. No. Wait, no.
Okay. Counselor Longmire, did I see your hand up?
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you, Warden, for looking into this. And although the search isn't conclusive of all parts and pieces, it's a great start and it's necessary. We need to tighten up on our processes and make us smarter for the future. Anything that can limit or remove tensions in the room is absolutely so important. I would also like to just say, when the warden does vote, I'm often questioning when your hand will be seen. So when it is the yes or the nay, I'm just wondering if we could see that at the time rather than at the time of the count. I don't get to see it, I guess.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I'll make an effort to not just say voice, but also raise my hand. Thank you for that. Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any other hands up, so we'll move along to the, there's no business arising from the minutes.
Excuse me?
Councillor Hudson?
Yes, perhaps there is an item. And if you want to look at page 6 of 84, and this was business arising from the minutes at our last meeting, and it had to do with the Annapolis waterkeeper's presentation. And there was a motion made at that time. And I was wondering if there should be an update in respect to that motion.
I'm just looking, I'm just trying to find that, Councillor Hudson. I'm looking at 6.
It's on page 6.
Second from the top. I have it now.
Yep.
I don't think that was, the way I read it, it doesn't look like it was going to necessarily come back at this meeting, but perhaps when Mr. Dick provides his CAO report, I think it would be appropriate if you asked him if there's been any movement with respect to that issue.
Fine.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Where are we? We're at new business 6.1 information report, community development update. And that's page 12. Page 12 of our package. Does any staff wish to expand on that, or do any councillors have any questions? I don't see any hands up, so we'll move along. Next is a recommendation report, inclement weather, unsafe travel conditions policy amendment. And that's at page 14 of 84. There's a recommended motion. Deputy Warden, would you like to read the recommended motion?
Recommendation that municipal council amend AM-2.1.22 inclement weather, unsafe travel conditions policy as circulated, 7-day notice.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Redden seconds. Discussion? Councillor Redden?
Thank you, Warden. I think it's a great adjustment.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Councillor LeBlanc?
I know, thank you. I know that before what would happen is the county would follow the same rules of closing or opening according to the school board. Would that stay in the same? Or would it be, because this is a great change. But would it also maintain the fact that they could reopen at like 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the afternoon? Or does it have nothing to do anymore with the school closures? I guess I've asked a couple of different things there, sorry.
Would someone from staff like to respond? Yeah, Ms. Campbell?
Sure. It really has very little relationship now because depending on the type of work that the employee does, they can make arrangements with their supervisor to work from home or come into the office. So it really has very little to do with the school closures anymore. And different staff live different distances from the office. So I, for example, am an employee that lives very close to the office. So in most circumstances, I'm just going to come into the office, whereas somebody who lives 35 minutes away, their supervisor is certainly going to give consideration to them being able to work from home. So it alleviates downtime, and COVID and making it possible for employees to work from home has certainly changed this circumstance.
If I could say thank you. And that's what I was wondering, only if that school closure dependent was gone with this policy totally. So it is. Thank you.
Councillor Sheridan?
Just curious, if it fell on one of our committee of the whole or council days, the storm, could we continue on via Zoom with staff working from home rather than cancel our meeting?
Ms. Campbell, can you respond? I see you nodding.
Yes. In fact, there are circumstances where we've had meetings going on during adverse weather meetings of staff, and we've had hybrid meetings or Zoom meetings to take the place of people having to travel in adverse weather.
I was just curious because the notice of meeting usually says where the meeting is going to take place. So I didn't know if this would be able to be transferable from one day to the next to have it by Zoom.
Ms. Campbell, you
And
want to?
if I could additionally add, I believe it's further on the, or it's going to be a late addition that maybe was missed, that we need to put in place a policy providing for electronic meetings. So if it's not on the agenda today, we are going to have to put in place a policy enabling electronic meetings of council, because once we pass the state of emergency, we have to have a policy in place to enable meeting electronically.
Thank you.
Ms. Campbell, I don't know if it's just my computer, but your voice is a little garbled when you're speaking. I don't know if that can be corrected, but I thought I'd point that out.
Yeah, your sound is pretty bad, Dawn.
I'll log off and log back on, see if that helps.
Okay. All right, I think I saw another hand up. Did I? Councillor Longmire?
Thanks. I just want to say thank you to Councillor Sheridan for raising that question, because that was my question as well, along with the addition to the Zoom opportunity to continue after the pandemic, of course. And how would we go about the notification for citizens to understand that the process would continue for our meetings in Zoom if inclement weather were to be the challenge?
Ms. Campbell hasn't come back yet. Is there someone else on staff that might respond, or should we just wait to have her come back on? Madam Clerk?
I could jump in and say that if a meeting was changed from meeting in person to meeting by Zoom, that would be changed on the web calendar notice. That's how we advise public about the meetings. So that if, as long as the right people took their computer home before a storm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Hudson?
Yes, just my own clarification. Are all staff or administrative staff set up to work from home?
Mr. Dick, can you respond to that?
The answer to that is yes.
Okay, I guess that just, my question is that if you are going to stay home, you're still going to work.
Correct.
So there's no such thing as take, it says in here, take paid time off. So I just make that point.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Prout. Councillor Prout.
Thank you. I'm very much in favor of this change in policy. I think it's a smart thing to do, and I'll be voting for it. Thank you.
I'm looking around. Oh, Councillor LeBlanc.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to add something. It could be really nice here, but really bad down there. The weather is different from one place to another. So what happens if, I'm talking about council meetings, that's or any meetings that we have. Some try to get down the road and it doesn't work out because it's just awful. That doesn't apply to be able to be a Zoom meeting, because then there's not a Zoom meeting set up. So how would you, how would you join on? Is there a backup plan for that one, or is there any thoughts behind that specific thought?
While we wait for Don to rejoin us, certainly my thought is to make that access available for all meetings.
Okay.
Respecting that sometimes people are not able to attend in person, whether that be council or staff. And I can recall a meeting last October when I was on annual leave. I did attend a meeting from Ontario. So that's part of the procedural bylaw that the warden referred to earlier is one of the things that we'll be discussing about allowing people to have access to it through virtual means.
True, but there's a difference between you were away because of good reason, on vacation or whatever the case may be, but you still want to join into the meeting, whereas this is a planned meeting at a specific place, and then all of a sudden there's a hitch. Then can it move too quickly to accessing Zoom for that specific counselor, for example?
The intent would be to allow that. I'm not sure what quick means. And I would leave that in David and Carolyn's hands, but certainly it happened a couple of weeks ago with the emergency call that some of us attended via Zoom, some of us attended in person. So certainly with those things going to be accommodated. It might mean, and Carolyn, you can help me out here, it might mean that a 9 o'clock meeting might have to be delayed till 9:30. And I don't know what the time frame is. I don't know how long it takes Carolyn and David to do it, but certainly that's something we're considering in our procedural bylaw update.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That's what I needed to know.
I think I saw another hand up. Deputy Warden.
Thank you. I'd like to thank staff for this recommendation, and I'll be voting in favor of it. Thank you.
Councillor Hudson, did I see your hand up? No? Anybody else? I don't see any hands up, so I'll call for the vote. The motion has been read. It's on page 14. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you very much. The next item is a recommendation report tax exemption policy amendment.
I'll read that. The recommendation report AM dash 1.4.12 tax exemption policy amend. That municipal council amend AM dash 1.4.12 tax exemption and reduction policy by moving Middleton and District Lions Club, property number 903-228-819 from District 8 to District 9. Moving the Keith Lodge, property number 804-561-5 or 856 from District 9 to District 8, and adding Bear River Board of Trade, lot 95 ICDEF, 100 Wharf Street, property number 807-029-330 to District 8, 7-day notice.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Sheridan seconds. Discussion? Councillor Barto?
Thank you. I just wanted some clarification, I guess, moving a club from one district to another. Does that relates to those tax exemptions are related to the property, but it's only showing that one property number, not where they're going, where they're coming from, but not where they're going to, or vice versa. It's not clear. And also on the Keith Lodge, it's the same problem as we don't have all the information as to voting on where that tax exemption is going to be placed.
So if I may, Mr. Warden, 2 of the properties are moving districts and the exemption is in place. And the 3rd property is a brand new exemption. That's the Bear River Board of Trade.
So the number there, that's where they're going to, or where they're coming from
The Bear River,
for Middleton and
they're
Keith
moving
Lodge.
from one to the other. They're moving from District 8 to 9 and 9 to 8. And Bear River is a new exemption.
So if they're moving a district,
The exemption still
Okay.
applies. It's just moving districts.
yeah, so we should have it noted what the property number is they're going to.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
Madam Clerk?
First 2 are housekeeping items. They were listed improperly in the policy. They should have been, as you can see by the property number, the first digit refers to the district they're actually in. So in the policy, they appeared under the wrong district. So the first 2 are just housekeeping so that they are shown under the proper district. Nothing's moving except in the policy where it was captured in the wrong district.
Thank you for explaining that, Carolyn. I was actually scratching my head.
Yeah. So for instance, the Middleton and District Lions Club, the property number starts with a 9, so it's in District 9. It was showing in District 8, so we're just putting it under District 9 in the policy. The Keith Lodge is the same thing. Housekeeping in the policy, the first.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Redden?
Thank you, Warden. I see there's 8 other digits here, and I think the next 4 after the first one are the date of it being added. What are the other 4? Maybe I'm wrong about the first.
Yeah, those property numbers are the numbers assigned from the province. It's different from the assessment account number. I don't know how they've been this format for the 25 years I've been here. All it was important to me was that the first number designates the district that it's in.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Sheridan, did I see your hand up?
Yes, you did, but my question did get answered because I thought maybe when they did a boundary review, it somehow got left behind in a District 8, the Lions Club, but it was explained out very well. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I don't see any. So I'll call for a vote on the motion as read. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you.
6.4,
6.4, yeah.
recommendation report, AM-2.4.1, performance evaluation policy repeal. That municipal council repeal AM-2.4.1, performance evaluation policy, 7-day notice.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Longmire seconds. Discussion? Councillor Hudson, I see your hand up.
Yes, I think it's very, or in my opinion, I think it's very important that we do have a policy regarding evaluations. And I think the current policy, as I see it here, is all fine, with the exception of one section. And that section has to deal with the authority of the CAO to grant increases. And my suggestion would be is that we don't repeal this policy, is that we just go back and amend it by removing on page 35 of 84, the 6.0 and perhaps the 7.0 as well. Up to that point, I think the policy is fine, and I think it should be kept in place. Because up to that point, it does not infringe on the CAO's authority.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Hudson. Are there any other comments? Councillor Longmire?
Thank you. And I would have to agree with Councillor Hudson on that. I do know that we are certainly out of date with performance reviews, and that again would be just problematic. Thank you.
Any other, Councillor Barto?
Just like to reflect that as well and say that I agree that I don't feel that we should be repealing this. We could amend it, but not repeal it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Me.
Councillor LeBlanc?
So I'm fairly certain that we're going to have some kind of performance evaluation policy coming up. Maybe, or I guess I'm going to ask the question, if we repeal this one, are we going to be seeing one in the near future of a new one? A new revamped one? Or no?
Mr. Dick, can you respond to that?
I'll allow or let Don respond to that, Mr. Warden.
I'll try if my sound quality is better. So a new human resources policy that I'm working on is going to require a system of performance evaluation, but it would not necessarily outline how it's done. And the intent in requesting your consideration to repeal this is to take away the performance evaluation system being undermined by being a merit increase driven process rather than an examination of the quality and work plan for the employee.
Councillor Councillor Redden, is your hand up?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Warden. I'm of the feeling I'm quite content to repeal the whole thing, as the problem stated is the salary part on 6, and the rest of the policy seems to build towards that. Although I'm also content to leave it here until we have a replacement HR policy ready. One thing I did want to sort of emphasize is in background, there's 3 bullet points laid out as to the CAO's responsibilities. And in the Municipal Government Act, the first one is a shall, and the second 2 are may. The CAO may do these things. The third one is there listed out, and it's under the MGA. It's that the CAO is allowed to do those things, but it is subject to the policies of council. I point this out because the opening statement before these bullet points is rather firm and tends to lead someone to think that it's more the CAO shall do all these things. I will say that in the past, somebody pointed out that this may in the MGA was an obligatory may, and I won't say I actually really understood what an obligatory may is, but that's all.
Thank you. Councillor Barto, I just saw your hand up, did I?
Yes, it was up before you started recognizing me, and then you went to Brad. So I'm not sure what's up with that. But anyway, here goes. I was kind of going to say the same thing, but if we are going to receive a revised policy that's in production right now or in the process, it would not be wise to repeal the current one until the new one is available. You know, that leaves a dead zone where we don't have one. I think that it's prudent to present the revised policy prior to removing the other. Either amend or replace this one would be the thing, not to repeal it at this time, because it just leaves a blank space until, and we don't know when the new policy is going to be presented. So there's a time duration that we don't even know. So that's that was my points, I guess. Thank you.
Ms. Campbell, I believe you wish to respond to Councillor Bartow's comment.
Yes, the reason that we brought this forward at this time is that we are not in compliance with this policy. And so to leave it in effect and not comply with it seems wrong. So we're regrouping and doing a new performance evaluation system. And we had looked to repeal this so that we as staff were not contravening a policy of council.
Sure, there's other policies in the same SEP that we haven't got around to reviewing yet. So I think I'm not a fan of removing it ahead of time. It, you know, it just goes against procedures that I'm more comfortable with. Thank you.
Councillor Sheridan?
I've been listening to all the comments, but when I read it, I read it kind of differently. I read it that the CAO needs to move forward and maybe make some changes within his office. And in order to do that, this policy would help if it was repealed so he could move forward and make some changes. And maybe the CAO can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think he needs to move forward. I don't want to hold him up if he sees changes necessary to be made.
Thank you. Councillor Hudson?
Yes, I would agree with Councillor Bartow in respect to his comments. And I think it's important that we have a policy, and and that the policy continue until the new one is presented for approval by council. I don't see that why an existing policy would interfere with the development and presentation of a new policy. Thank you.
The next name I have on my list was Councillor LeBlanc.
Thank you. I tend to look at page 31 and look at the background and the financial implications. And then listening to Dawn, having given her explanation that if we have a policy and we're not adhering to that policy, then the policy should be gone and replaced by a proper policy, which is, from my understanding, is being started or has been started through HR and will continue to be worked on. The only thing is I'd like, if I know that this is an impossibility probably, is there a date and time, like next month or 2 months, that the new policy, we would see something in writing? That would be my question.
Ms. Campbell, I think you may have responded to some degree to that, but can you perhaps respond more directly to Councillor LeBlanc's question?
Certainly, within the next 2 months is certainly my goal. My partner in HR, Kate Ingalls, and the CAO, and I plan to meet to review this and other HR practices very soon. We've been trying to schedule this and just haven't gotten to it over the past little while. And I would say one of the reasons is because I was off with COVID.
Well, thank you very much for that. And because of that reason, I think I would go with repealing it so we can have a proper policy that we are actually following. Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Thank you. Councillor Redden?
Thank you, Warden. One of the things that just occurred to me is that there's a provision in this policy for reviews. One of the terms of review to be completed by March 31st, which would, I guess, put us more. Sorry. And one of the other implications that this has been outlined here are the financial implications for budgeting and things like that. And so if if it's in place, it will impact our, and if it's in place and we have to have reviews done by March 31st, that will directly impact our budget upcoming. So although I am broadly of the mind of Councillor Bartow, why repeal something without a replacement in place? I do see some other reasons for getting rid of this now.
Thank you. I don't have any other names on my list here of hands that I've seen up. And I don't see any hands up now. So if it's all right with council, I'll call for a vote on the motion to repeal AM 2.4.1. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. 1, 2, 9 to 2, the motion carries.
Never mind.
Thank you very much. All right. Next is the recommendation report, Fire Services Capital Withdrawal, Annapolis Royal Volunteer Fire Department.
Yep. 6.5 recommendation report. Fire Services Capital Withdrawal, Annapolis Royal Fire Department, that municipal council not authorize a withdrawal of $220,000 from the Fire Services Capital Reserve to the Annapolis Royal Volunteer Fire Department in the 2021-22 fiscal year to assist in the rebuild of a top mount pumper, as the department did not follow policy protocols.
Is there a seconder for that? Has your hand up as a second, Councillor Longmire?
Oh, sorry.
Pardon me?
No, sorry.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Redden seconds. Discussion, Councillor Longmire?
Thank you. Just a few points that stand out to me. When I go to the second page, 38 of 84, and I was focusing on, this is the second time, first paragraph, this is the second time this department has gone around this policy. I'm curious as to what the first error may have been from that department. And I guess I would then go back and say, it appears that they had purchased their own chassis and that this request with their own funds, and that this request is actually for the refurbishing of the truck. So I've done a lot of digging throughout this. So I guess I would just like to have some clarification around how the process was managed with that first issue. And was there a letter delivered to the department so that they could improve their processes? Because that's so key in preventing any issues in the future. Thank you.
Is there someone on staff that can respond to that? Ms. Mason?
The previous occasion was many years ago, and I was not the person who wrote the request the last time. So I'm just catching up now with it. It has happened before. It is unfortunate that the chief didn't realize that going around the policy, as I've indicated. So buying the chassis already, and then the chassis has been delivered to the builder already. And therefore, they didn't come to council ahead of making those financial arrangements, as is in the policy. My requirement is to follow the policy and to outline to you where the department did not follow the policy. That is why I have put in here that I can't recommend the policy, the releasing of the money based on the policy, because when I read the words, I understand that they have gone around the policy by deciding to buy a chassis and then expecting council to fund the money for the rest of it before we have given approval for the truck to be replaced. That's the best I can do.
Councillor Longmire, did that respond to your question?
No, it doesn't answer at all. I believe it's two different parts here. they've purchased the chassis with their own funds. This is clearly a request for monies from the reserve that is clearly taxpayers' dollars. We need this truck. If we do not have this truck, they only have, the Annapolis Royal Fire Department has a truck for Annapolis Royal, but it leaves us in a really difficult place. The citizens are not going to be pleased with that. And although I know in this room today, we can all agree fire services are absolutely necessary, I don't think that the delay is acceptable. I would go back to process. Regardless of when the chiefs turned over, who was in the seat, who wrote the letter, is there a letter on file? Certainly there should be. It's a very negative impact, in my opinion, on this group of volunteers who extend themselves beyond their natural work hours to fight fires in inclement weather beyond. While we sleep, they fight. During the winter over in my community, my district, there was a tragic fire. They worked endless, 9 departments, I believe. The weather was bitter. They cannot function without getting this done. They only have so much time before that truck is going to be rendered out of service, maybe a couple of months. So although I'd like to think that that we're not going to vote this down, we need some serious discussion around this and probably some problem solving with staff on how we move forward with better processes, gatekeeping, note keeping, letter keeping, so that we know that everyone, when hands turn over, seats turn over in these departments, that they are aware of proper processes. Thank you.
Councillor Bartow, I saw your hand up, I believe, next. Did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Longmire has covered a lot of concerns that I had. I guess I'd just like to reiterate that the volunteer fire service existed prior to the fire service rate that's been collected. They did fantastic job raising money, providing a service to the essential service to this community, our communities, and to help them out. The service rate was put in place for money for when they need to replace equipment. I researched this, and that truck is approaching, it's not quite 20 years old, but our own policy says that the county truck frontline pumper cannot be older than 20 years old. They're being proactive. The truck has experienced some issues from my research, and to say that they can't have this money, which is our taxpayers' money, raised so that these fire departments, to help them exist in these trying times, to deny that, I really, over something trivial in a way, and I looked at all the information that was provided, and it did say in the letter from the chief to the county that the contract with the manufacturer would not be signed until the county give approval. Now, I heard afterwards that there was indications that, oh yeah, it was going to be done, or the truck was bought and it was at the fabricators. I'm not sure what that all means, but the buying the chassis ahead of time, there was a really substantially good reason for that. In the past, without help from the county, the Forest Service was able to provide all this equipment, and we got to give them a big thanks for that, and really well managed money to actually get this apparatus and protection gear in place. I think that they should be given a hand for that, not penalty. But the truck was bought ahead of time, which in fact, due to their wisdom and the research, saved the department at least $110,000 to do it this way. Are we going to penalize them for trying to save $110,000? I don't think we should. You know, and it was the answer to the question about the second time the department has gone around policy. Well, apparently that was on a different administration, and maybe that paperwork, they're not aware of it. Whether they was aware of it or not, I don't think that the intention was to go around policy. It was just the way it evolved in a effort to save money. And if they can save this money, and if that money becomes available, or they don't spend it there, it's that much closer that they can have $110,000 for replacing turnout gear and other important things to provide the protection to their members who volunteer their time in at all hours of the day and night to provide this service for us. So I don't really see, because even in this documentation, it states that they're not going to have the signed contract. Now, the intention or the perception is one thing, but I've dealt with a lot of contracts in the past, and nothing is for sure or given until you get the signed contract in place. And apparently they've said that they would not do that. So I don't really see where they've tried to go around the policy personally. You know, it's an important thing the bottom line is this money was raised for this purpose, to hold it back so that they can't provide us the frontline truck that we require replaced before the 20-year period goes up. Anyway, I'll just leave it at that for now. I think I've got my points across. Thank you.
I have on my list Deputy Warden Gunn, Councillor LeBlanc, Councillor Sheridan, and then Councillor Longmire, but I saw Mr. Dick's hand up, and I believe to respond to something that Councillor Bartow said. Is that correct? You wanted to respond to that, Mr. Dick?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. It's first of all, I want council and the community to recognize that staff recognizes the valuable service that volunteer fire departments provide to the community. So this is no way us expressing our dissatisfaction with that. So I want council and the community to know that for sure. Staff's got a responsibility to follow policy. In staff's opinion, the policy wasn't followed. And I recognize that council is being bombarded with firefighters calling them, because they've also called me. We're not suggesting that we wouldn't buy this vehicle, but we're suggesting that there's a policy that we need to follow, and we're following it. We also expect that council is going to overrule us on this. But Cheryl and Dawn have a responsibility to follow the policies that are in place. In their opinion, the policy was not followed. That's why they're writing the report. I will also say, and what I'm really hoping to get out of this is that we are wanting to meet and discuss with the fire departments a new methodology of doing this. Do I think this is the right way to do it, is to have them come and ask us first before they do it? No, I think it should all be done at budget time. We should make these approvals, a carte blanche approval at budget time. We met with 3 fire officials. I think it was at the very tail end of February. And I asked them, I said, get your group together and we can meet to start revamping how we fund and how we approve these. And I understood that they were going to get their group together. We were going to meet with them sometime in the summer. And then we're going to come back to council with some new policies on how we adapt funding, fire operationally and capital going forward. So that's the expectation we have. We understand council is going to approve this fire truck. And quite frankly, that's probably the only decision you can make. But we're trying to do what the policy says, and we want to change that policy because, as we all are aware, it's 20 years old. It needs to be revised, and that's what the intent is from staff to do that this summer. I guess that's all I want to say. I know council wants to speak to this issue. I've been called by firefighters as well. I know council has. And at the end of the day, if you want to overrule it, that's what the expectation would be. We just want, going forward, we want to revamp this policy on operational funding and capital funding for not the current budget. We don't have time for that, but the next budget process that we go through, this is what we would like to do.
Thank you. Next on my list was Deputy Warden Gunn.
Thank you. I had hoped that this wasn't a form of punishment for Annapolis Fire Services, but clearly, Annapolis needs the pumper, and Annapolis County seems to be holding them up because their policy hadn't been followed to the T. You know, our tax rate includes monies for these fire services. They're entitled to the funds. And as for as our former CAO pointed out, they are a good deal for fire services. If we had to hire this out, our tax rate would be through the roof. They're a good deal. We need to support them. Thank you.
Next, I had Councillor LeBlanc.
Thank you. I was going to bring the points that our CAO, Mr. Dick did, whereas we have policy and all the other fire departments seem to have followed policy, and it seems to be a problem. And we expect our staff to follow policy. And as he mentioned, things need to change and policies need to be improved. And for that reason, he has explained in detail exactly what needs to be done. My question, I only have a question about the fire truck. After that, this fire truck is 20 years old. That's a yes from someone? Yes. And so what's the life expectancy of a fire truck? Isn't it 20 years old? And then it has to be changed?
I see
Right.
some nods.
Yes, I see a yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Couple of yeses. So not that I'm indicating that we should be spending more. However, they would want to have, what's the number, $220,000 from the fire service capital? I'm just wanting to know, does it make sense to spend all that money on a truck that's at its limits? That's just my question. And other than that, I agree with what Mr. Dick has outlined for the future.
Was there a question there, Councillor LeBlanc, that you?
Yeah, does it make sense to spend all this money on a truck that's 20 years old? I'm not quite sure.
Is there someone from staff, Ms. Mason?
Answer that question. The chassis, which is underneath the body, is what needs to be replaced. So that is what they have already bought. What they're going to do, my understanding is they are taking the body from the old truck and placing it on the new chassis, but there is a cost, and they are requiring all of their money that is in their capital reserve in order to cover that cost. There will still be additional monies, I suspect, required, whether it comes from future withdrawals or some of their own fundraising.
So will this truck that they're assembling, I guess is what I'm going to use for a word, give a life expectancy? Will it be a 20-year life expectancy expensive for this particular truck after they put all that work in? That's
my understanding. It will be
Okay.
brought up to standard.
So we'll be having a good 20 years out of this rebuild is what guess I'll call it. Okay, great. Thank you.
I see your hand, Councillor Bartow, but I have some others ahead of you. I'll come back to you. Next on my list is Councillor Sheridan. Did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you. Excuse me. I just want to say thank you to the staff. I appreciate them following policy because they're doing their job. Excuse me. Just give me 1 second. Sorry about that. They're just doing their job. When I read this, I knew that they were put on the spot. I thought, okay, what else can she do? She has to follow policy. It's up to us whether we want to move forward with this. So I guess I read it in a different way. She had no choice but to write what she wrote. And we can overrule this. So she was in a spot. So I just want to say thank you to the staff. It's a difficult position to be put in, but I definitely will be not supporting what the recommendations suggest, and I will be supporting the department. Thank you.
Councillor Connell?
Yes, and I agree with Council Sheridan, is that we have many policies to do with giving not only fire departments, but community groups and everything like that. And if everybody jumps outside the policies, we're going to have a big headache. I support giving the fire department the money, but it should be they should be let known that they did go outside the policy Because do we want 9 other fire departments to jump on the same bandwagon and all of a sudden order trucks and we don't know nothing about it, and they're calling and wanting their money? And so there is a policy, and I'm very proud of the staff following that policy. I'm not disagreeing that we can overturn it because it's a good thing for the fire departments, but they still have to learn. It is a policy that they sat down and knew it was all in existence when it started. So there is a procedure. Maybe the seats have changed in that fire department. Maybe the new person didn't get updated on how the policy works, but that's part of their responsibility too. So I think that the staff did a proper thing.
Thank you, Councillor Connell. I have Councillor Longmire and Councillor Bartow on my list who have already spoken. And before I go to them, I'd like to ask if there's anyone who hasn't spoken. Councillor Prout.
Thank you. I agree completely with much of what has been said. This was a very problematic issue on the agenda. I liked what Councillor Connell has said about, procedures have to be followed. I took great comfort from what the CAO and Ms. Mason have talked about. Policy has to be followed. Staff was following the policy. I like the answer to the question that Councillor LeBlanc asked. Will we have, at the end of this, will that fire department have a piece of equipment that will be up to date and ready to give us, or give them and us, the county, 20 years of service? And if that is the answer, I'll be in support of it. I do think, the old adage, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, we being the council, it's important to follow policy. And perhaps, as others have said, the people in positions of authority within the fire department have changed. But this is a serious thing. Rules are there to be followed, but the need is also there. It's a tough call. Thank you.
I see Councillor Hudson's hand up, who hasn't spoken yet on this. Councillor Hudson, I'll recognize you. You're muted, Councillor Hudson. You're still muted, Councillor Hudson.
Am I there now? I will be voting in favor of giving these funds to the Annapolis Fire Department, but I wouldn't mention one thing. Maybe it's for my own clarification. The life expectancy of the truck. I've been led to believe in previous discussions here that 20-year period relates to the insurability of the vehicle, not necessarily the life of the truck. I'm sure that in a lot of the fire departments, there are vehicles that are older than 20 years that are still used and are operational and still used. So I just want to make that point, I guess.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who hasn't spoken? I see your hand up, Councillor Redden. I don't think you've spoken on this issue yet. Go ahead.
Thank you, Warden. I will say I'm in favor of this. I really feel we shouldn't contravene our policy, and I greatly appreciate that our staff has brought it here and said it doesn't conform with our policy. I've been through our policy in quite a lot of detail, and I disagree with the staff about whether it meets our policy, so that's why I'm inclined to support it. But I don't really know, because our policy outlines 6 points that are supposed to be 6 things of information that are meant to be brought forward. And I don't have all of those. Now, the report in front of me also outlines that this is about transparency with tax dollars. And I think that's a really good point. And I don't know if I want to see the three, what are they called? The pricings on 3 trucks, because those can easily run into, 100 pages I've seen before. In our county package, but I would like to see some more detail around the truck pricing and truck requirements as outlined by our policy. What has me of more concern here is this report comes off as I read it, a little bit hostile. And I really think that we should be working with volunteer groups in our organization in an incredibly proactive way. And if we need to hold their hand so that they can be compliant with policy, and I don't mean that in a derogatory sense by any means, we should be doing everything we can to help them get through this. The idea that they've not been in compliance with policy before, to me is incredibly, it's not relevant unless we were going to punish them for not being in compliant this time. Just because somebody stole before doesn't mean they're stealing this time. When it comes down to punishing them for stealing, then it becomes relevant, but not whether they are guilty or not. And I will say my thoughts on the purchasing the chassis ahead of time is, well, they've also purchased the back of the truck ahead of time. They're going to put on the new chassis, so maybe we shouldn't fund them for that reason either. If you want to split hairs about where a contract sits, but those are just my disagreement on what the contract is and whatnot. So I'm quite content to support this grant, but that's because I think it is in compliance with policy and not that I want to contravene policy.
Thank you. Anyone else who has not yet spoken on this issue? I don't think there is. So I've got on my list, Councillor Longmire, you wanted to speak for a second time?
Sure. I guess, thank you, Warden. I do. I want to extend gratitude to the staff for putting this together and for, yes, policy has to be followed. But we also know these groups of volunteers are made up of persons who not necessarily are aware of policy. And it is of my opinion that we should do better in educating and providing them opportunity to learn about proper policy. With going back to that first offense, if you want to use that word, if we don't have a letter on file and we can't go back to it, and we can't suggest that we've had a discussion with any parties about where it went awry, then no one learns. No one has an opportunity to learn from it. I don't think there was any ill intent on the fire department, and I don't believe there's any ill intent on the part of the county. But the county has an obligation. They hold the money, and they do have an obligation to educate. So although I don't ever want to go against policy, I do know there are many policies out of date within our county. And so I would suggest that we do better at educating. And as our CAO has explicitly stated, reaching out and bringing that group together, the fire groups together, and tightening up on all of that is going to be awesome for all of us. Insurance. Without that truck, what would our insurance look like as citizens, right? It all affects us in so many ways. They purchased the chassis with their own monies. They've actually tried to save us money. And so I applaud them for their forward thinking. There are so many working parts to this. I want to see us, I guess, as Councillor Redden had said, I would not like to see this look so negative, but rather we need to do our part and do better at the educational portion of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bartow, did you want to speak for a second time?
Sure, thank you. I wanted to speak before just to maybe satisfy previous counselors' comments, but I'll do that now. But while I'm at it, I got three comments. One is, I believe it's our county policy that the departments have to make sure that they have a truck that's less than 20-year old to service for the county. I'm not sure that it's the insurance requirement but anyway, maybe that's something we can dig it out to clarify. This will be, a huge wake-up call to the department so that, they'll be thinking about that if they want to replace another truck down the road. So kudos to staff for bringing that up. But I still stand with the department as far as needing the vehicle is paramount. And I appreciate that the CAO saying that maybe policy will be looked at to smooth out the rough edges. And going back to Councillor LeBlanc's request or question, I made a lot of calls, did a lot of research based on this, so I could be well versed. And it's not a question of will it be good for 20 years. It's essentially going to be a brand new truck. The chassis is new. Part of the refit will be new pumps and new controls, and everything related to the function of the truck will be brand new. The only thing that's not brand new is the aluminum chassis, and the aluminum is in perfect shape. They will be doing some modifications because part of their problem now for replacement is the way the original body was designed. It wasn't allowing them to wash it out around the frame. But they will be modifying that so that that problem will go away, and also refitting it with a control panel inside instead of an outside to make it better for the operator to provide his job. But so essentially, when the manufacturer is done with the truck, it will be brand new from stem to stern. They're just reusing the aluminum body parts for the cabinets and the tank and everything, which is in perfect condition right now. That's the information that I was provided, and I just thought I would impart that. So just to give a comfort level to council that it's not, just a refurbished, half done truck. It's essentially when it's done, it should be it will be classified as a new truck. Like I said, all the operating gear will be brand new, and it's just refurbishing the panel and thing to go onto it so that they can save a bunch of money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartel. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this issue? Councillor Longmire, you've spoken twice. I think I'll keep looking around to see if there's anybody else, and I think we'll call for the vote. I do get a sense that there is a consensus of council. So I will point out that in the discussion around the table, some people are saying they're in favor of the grant, which is contrary to the motion, which is to not pay it. So I just don't want there to be any confusion about what you're voting for. So I would ask the clerk to read the motion on the floor so that we're all straight.
It was moved by Deputy Warden Gunn, seconded by Councillor Redden, that Municipal Council not authorize a withdrawal of $220,000 from the Fire Services Capital Reserve to the Annapolis Royal Fire Department in the 2021-22 fiscal year to assist in the rebuild of a top mount pumper, as the department did not follow policy protocols. That is the motion on the floor.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye and raise your hand. I see none. All those opposed to the motion, say nay and raise your hand. Nay.
Hey,
The motion is unanimously defeated. Thank you. All right, thank you, Council.
excuse me, do we need another motion to approve it? Because we just Nick's the one that was denying it, so we need a either a new motion or a revised motion to approve the issuance of that money.
Mr. Dick, can you respond to that inquiry?
I'll leave that in the clerk's hands.
Um,
Council can put another motion on the floor.
That's right.
All right, then it seems as though staff, including the clerk, suggest that if we do want to approve the request for the funds, that we put a separate motion on the floor to do that. Would someone be prepared to make that motion, Deputy Warden?
Thank you. That municipal council authorize a withdrawal of $220,000 from the fire services capital reserve to the Annapolis Royal Volunteer Fire Department in the 2021-22 fiscal year to assist in the rebuild of a top mount pumper as the department needs.
Okay.
So you're ending after the word pumper, is that where we are?
That's right. Yes.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Longmire seconds. Debate? Seeing none, I'll call for, Councillor Connell?
Well, I'm hoping that there'll probably somebody watching our council, our committee, the whole meeting and realize that we overruled a policy because of our beliefs in the good services we get out of our fire departments, but we still want to make sure they realize that we do have policies in place, and until they change, staff has to follow those policies. And so we should encourage them to, all the fire departments, if they're looking for funding, to go through our policy.
Thank you. Councillor Hudson? You're muted, Councillor Hudson.
I guess I would like to propose an amendment to that motion. I believe the motion contained dates, and I think it was the 21-22 fiscal years. And I would make a motion or amendment that the dates be removed, because that money could be spent past this fiscal year and the current fiscal year end.
Is there a seconder to that proposed amendment? Councillor Longmire seconds the amendment. Discussion on the amendment? The amendment to remove the dates.
Just so it's to remove the words 2021-22 fiscal year.
I would say in the 2021-22 fiscal year are the words that would be removed.
Thank you.
Discussion on the amendment. I don't see any hands up, so I'll call for a vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Opposed? It's carried unanimously. So those words will come out of the motion on the floor. Now, discussion on the motion as amended. I had Councillor Longmire's hand up on them, so I'll recognize you, Councillor Longmire.
Thank you, Warden. I would go to page 37 of 84, and it is January 12th, 2022. And I would like to caution how announcements are made. This announcement of the purchase of the chassis, although I believe they bought this chassis with their own funds. And so for all intents and purposes, that announcement isn't not properly done as far as I'm concerned. But I guess we need to caution how, these types of announcements are made, because it does, it does raise questions. And I think it did raise some questions here as well. So I want to say thank you to Cheryl Mason for, all of these details did help to work through it for me. Thank you.
Any other comments on the motion as amended? I don't see any. So in order that I just want to remind that the vote is to authorize the withdrawal. That's the motion on the floor. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Opposed? Opposed. Councillor Gunn, how did you vote?
Oh, in favor.
Okay, thank you. The motion's carried. It appeared to be unanimous. Thank you, council. Let me just look at my watch for a minute. 10th, Councillor Redden, did you want to say something?
Very briefly, I don't know if we need a formal motion for this or not. The fire department had requested that they receive a letter noting how they were out of compliance for their records, so that there's something there for future use the next time they go looking for a truck. Do we want a formal motion for that, or can we just sort of ask?
Mr. Dick, can you respond to that?
Well, I'm not aware of that letter. I haven't seen it.
No, the fire department was requesting a letter.
But I'm not aware that they're requesting that. They haven't forwarded it to me.
They did it verbally to me.
Okay.
Yeah, should I get them to make it a formal request?
Well, I would have to see that request from the fire department, and then we can respond to it.
Thanks.
It's 10:30. I suggest we have Councillor Bartow before we break. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I don't want to step out of turn or anything, but the chief is in my district and I see him every once in a while. I will, if with your blessing, I will make an effort to stress what has happened at council in case he has not been, viewing it, so that he's fully aware of the concerns and the process. So I could just take that to the next level, just to, it would be good to have a formal letter from the county just to cover that. And I'm sure that that's going to be forthcoming, but I just thought I'd mention that. I didn't want to sound like I was taking over a duty that I shouldn't be, but in my discussions, in my conversations with him, I'm sure he'll probably be calling me anyway. So with your approval, I will stress and reiterate what's happened to council today.
Thank you for that. I'll declare a 15-minute break. We'll come back at 11:15. Call the meeting back to order. We're at 6.6. Recommendation report. Okay, Deputy Warden.
6.6 recommendation report, Annapolis County and Kings County Emergency Management Mutual Aid Agreement approved. That municipal council approved the municipal aid agreement between the County of Kings, Town of Berwick, Town of Kentville, County of Annapolis, Town of Annapolis Royal, and Town of Middleton, in accordance with the recommendation of the Annapolis Regional Emergency Management Advisory Committee.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Prout seconds. Discussion? Councillor Prout?
I'm not sure, but am I correct that the town of Wolfville might have been left out of your statement, Deputy Warden? Or maybe I misheard, but I didn't hear that one.
Wasn't there, sir?
Oh, should be, or it is on mine. The Town of Berwick, Town of Kentville, Town of Wolfville, and then County of Annapolis.
No, it should be, it should be included. That's my error.
It's not in mine, sir.
No, it isn't. That's my error. It should be included.
Okay.
It was included on page 45.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments?
There it is.
Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you for that. Next.
6.7, recommendation report, community grants program, current applications. That municipal council approve the allocation of grants as presented in Appendix A from the 2021-22 Community Grants Program in accordance with AM-1.4.9 Community Grants Policy for a total of $6,446 as follows. $2,400, $2,400 Port George Regional Recreation Commission. $1,646 Lawrencetown and Area Seniors Association, LASA, and $2,400, $2,400 to Clemensville and District Recreation Association.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor LeBlanc seconds. Discussion? Councillor Redden, did you want to, is this the one you wanted to discuss?
No, that is,
Oh, it was further down. It was with respect to the fire department, right? Sorry. Councillor Hudson?
Yes, just in respect to the Lawrencetown and Area Seniors Association, do we know if they've applied to the New Horizons? I know funding is available from them for the activities that they carry out.
Is there anyone that's able to respond to the question from Councillor Hudson?
Mrs. Chisholm.
Sorry, I missed that, Councillor LeBlanc.
Nancy Chisholm has her hand up.
Oh, thank you. Ms. Chisholm?
Thank you, Warden. They have not reported that they've got funding or applied for funding from New Horizons. However, I've discussed it with the applicant. Oftentimes I'll point them in the direction of other funding opportunities, but for this particular application, no, they have not.
Any other comments with respect to the motion on the floor?
Question?
Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you for that. We'll move along to I've discussed 6.8. Is volunteer week. And that's just a discussion. Who's going to lead that discussion?
I will lead that discussion, if that's okay, Nadine Barto.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Bartow.
I'd first like to thank you for giving Brian and I a few minutes to talk about this. We've had some inquiries, so I thought it was probably easiest just to come to you directly and let you know what's going on with Volunteer Week this year, because it is slightly different than in the past. Just a bit of background. This is something the county has been doing for decades now. I've been doing it since 2015, and I can honestly say the last 2 years during COVID have been challenging, to say the least. In the past, we had always had, a ceremony at King's Theatre to recognize our volunteers, and it always appreciated. The last 2 years, of course, with COVID restrictions, we were unable to do this. So we would recognize our volunteers still with certificates, but it would usually end up with me going to parking lots throughout Annapolis County, popping my trunk, standing back 6 feet, and the recipient coming to get their certificate, and me saying congratulations from a distance. They were always gracious and always grateful. I was surprised and also grateful that our CAO never got a phone call saying that municipal staff was doing sketchy stuff in parking lots, but it definitely brought to the forefront that, we have to change this a little bit. So because of restrictions, the dates would vary between us getting information out, working with the province because they also recognize volunteers. And we put applications in. So we are on a tight deadline, but we were also very determined that we still wanted to host this year and have our volunteers recognized, because I think I can confidently say everyone feels that's very important because they are essential in our community. So this year we are doing it the same but different. So I will explain that. When I say we're doing it the same, we are still collecting nominations. I have sent council an email explaining that nominations opened yesterday. I will be sharing this with my community group email group list, and I have an ad going in the Reader and also reaching out to our local publications to share with their peoples that we are accepting nominations. The deadline is April 15th, which is very tight. That gives us just over a month to receive our nominations. So I'm hoping that the community really jumps forward and helps us get the word out. Where we move in to the different is in the past, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar, but we used to collaborate with the two towns, Town of Middleton and Town of Annapolis Royal. During COVID, the Town of Annapolis Royal last year separated from this collaboration to do their own thing. The Town of Middleton stayed, but they had no residents nominated within the town. So this year we have all kind of gone our separate ways. Everyone was on board with that. So this is a county-only initiative. The towns are doing their own thing. This is this year. I'm not sure what that will look like next year. But right now we are on our own, I guess. We are also doing things a bit different in recognizing our volunteers. We will still be doing certificates, but to replace the King's Theater ceremony, because even though restrictions will be lifting on March 21st, there's no guarantee they will stay lifted. If we happen to have a spike in numbers and restrictions come back, it will put us once again in the same spot we were the past 2 years. So to try to avoid this, as COVID has taught us, we have plan A, B, C, and D. So our plan right now is to get our nominations in by April 15th. We will still have our selection committee to meet at the end of April sometime, and I will elaborate on that in a minute. And later in the summer or early fall, we plan to do an outdoor gathering. So maybe a picnic or a barbecue. This will give us a chance to give our volunteers a certificate and will also better enable our counselors and staff to interact with our volunteers, which hasn't always been something we've been able to do in the past. So this is our plan. Hopefully we'll move forward with that. We still will need the selection committee. I will be asking for a minimum of 2 counselors to participate in the selection committee, and I will be forwarding a memo for council next week to see if they would be interested in doing that. We're hoping to have 2 municipal staff and 2 community members to come forward. The selection committee goes through a process of where we rate all the nominations that come in, and the highest overall is the nomination that we apply or forward to the province for the Annapolis County Volunteer Representative. We have found over the past 2 years that the province has changed the way they also do Volunteer Week. They will be having their ceremony in the fall permanently here on in. They thought that was easier for other government agencies. So our deadline to get our application into the province is May. So by having the deadline on April 15th, this allows me the time to prepare that application and determine whose name is going to be put forward. And also, yeah, so I guess that's probably most of it in a nutshell. We are still going to go ahead with it. There was question there for a little while, but I think it's an important thing to do. I have heard already from 2 organizations that have come forward saying they're interested in nominating someone. So, I guess I'm reaching out to council for 2 reasons. One is to ask that we have 2 members come forward to sit on our selection committee, which can be decided next week, if that's all right. And also to help spread the word, because we are in such a tight deadline this year. I really need the help of counselors going out, talking to their constituents. They know organizations in their area that, you know, might be interested in nominating someone, or they themselves might know someone. So I am asking help in that regard. To say that COVID has changed the way we are doing things is an understatement. We really have to look at things differently. Everything I've spoke to you about today is this year for 2022. Things might change next year. And you know what? COVID also brought us, you know, it was devastating, but it also brought along opportunity, and maybe opportunity for things to grow. So Brian is actually going to share some of the thoughts of what this might look like moving forward. Is Brian on?
I don't see Brian.
Oh, just 1 second. Just 1 second. I'm going to go see if he's available.
Councillor Cotw, you want to say something?
Oh,
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, I know that a lot of organizations haven't met for over the last couple of years because of the COVID and stuff. Is it okay if, as a counselor, if we recognize somebody in our communities or in our district that puts a big effort into the volunteer surroundings within our district, can we nominate somebody?
I'll make the executive decision here and say yes, because we've actually had staff nominate people in the past. I think right now it's just important that our volunteers be recognized.
Yes,
So,
and that's why I was concerned is that a lot of my rural out in the rural areas, they haven't met they're just starting to meet. We met last night at the Port George Hall, and but things are just getting going because of the lifting of COVID restrictions. So yeah, it would be nice if us counselors, if we recognize somebody within our district that's putting an excellent effort into, even during the COVID times, it would be nice to recognize them for that. So thank you.
absolutely. And like I said, it's been challenging. And this year we've kind of been going with a moving target for some dates, which is why we're a little bit late getting started this year. So normally in a, what you call a normal year, I guess, I would have started asking for applications late summer, early fall. So here we are in spring and I'm asking for nominations. Volunteer Week actually falls on April 24th to 30th this year. In the past, we would have tried to have our ceremony during Volunteer Week, make it a big hurrah. We will definitely still recognize Volunteer Week through proclamation. One of the reasons I chose April 15th as a deadline is so I could have all the names collected and still feature them on Facebook, website during Volunteer Week. So there's still some recognition during the actual National Volunteer Week. It's just the in-person celebration is being planned for later summer, early fall.
I saw your hand up, Councillor Longmire, but I think maybe we'll wait until staff has finished their presentation. And Ms. Bartow, is Mr. Ord going to say something? He's not here. I don't see him.
Well, I guess I'm not quite sure what happened. I guess moving forward, we're just looking for, this has always been a staff initiative, something that Recreation Department took on for decades and done an absolutely wonderful job. Deb Bryan had always led it up then. Again, I've done it since 2015 with a lot of help from staff and community members, and it was wonderful. So I'm no longer with Recreation. It's kind of followed me into my next position here, which is great because, what better way than to deal with your community. But I think we're going to try in the future to get more community involvement in it and not just so much staff central. So, that's something we're going to be looking at into the future. But right now we're focused on 2022, which is all the ideas I've put forward to you and our game plan moving forward for this year.
Okay, I think we'll move, excuse me, move over to some comments from councillors. Councillor Longmire, did you want to say something?
Thank you. Thank you, Nadine, for this presentation. And sorry that we couldn't hear from Brian, but I'm sure you've shared much of his sentiment. I just want to say that in the past, I have helped at the King's Theatre with the event, and I also have been a twice over recipient. And I can tell you that the feeling you have being recognized is special, but it really is twofold. What you do and give as a volunteer in your community for others, no matter how big or how small the efforts are, they matter. And so, I look at our youth, I look at how we inspire our youth to step up to the plate. We are their mentors. We need to do that and do much more of that. So knowing that this week is coming upon us, no matter how we roll this out, the COVID did change much of our business, but thankfully it did not stop us from celebrating those integral people who live within our communities that extend their hand for help and keeps many organizations afloat. Many initiatives and efforts would never fly if we did not have those persons. So it's a wonderful thing. Thank you.
Any other comments from council? I don't see any. Thank you, Ms. Bartow. There is one other item that she raised, and that is the selection of 2 councillors to go on the selection committee. Councillor LeBlanc, I believe you're the chair of the nominating committee. Can you help me out as to whether we should just put this on the agenda next week for council to pick 2, or whether you want to go through the nomination committee?
No, this does not go through the nomination committee, Mr. Warden. It is on volunteer parts. If a counselor wishes to take part, they put their name in, or they give it to Nadine Bartow.
Okay, should we leave it at that? And I wonder, Madam Clerk, maybe we should just put this on the agenda for next week to make sure we do have 2 volunteers from council. If not, we'll raise it at the council meeting to try and see if we
Yeah,
can.
I expect to receive something from Nadine that will be in the agenda package.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again, Ms. Bartow.
Thank you.
Okay, next 6.9.
6.9, recommendation report, fire services capital withdrawal, Lawrencetown Volunteer Fire Department. That municipal council authorized the Lawrencetown and District Volunteer Fire Department to proceed with obtaining quotes for a replacement tanker.
A point of order, Warden.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Redden.
So I don't believe that this motion is appropriate for council to consider, and that we have no jurisdiction to give direction to the Lawrencetown District Fire Department. Our policy allows for the release of funds to fire departments. We can't tell them to do anything.
Would someone on staff like to respond to the point that Councillor Redden has brought up, Ms. Mason?
In the policy, it does require that they contact us when they are intending to replace a truck before they replace the truck. So what they have asked is to get council's blessing in order to proceed to purchase a new truck under the policy requirements.
Does that respond to Councillor Redden?
I mean, yes. I mean, it wasn't a matter of me not understanding why the motion was in front of us. It's that the motion, I believe, is inappropriate for us to entertain or pass in its current form.
Councillor LeBlanc?
LeBlanc, is this just a way? This is just a way for the Lawrencetown Fire Department to introduce to council that they're going to be looking for money down the road. I see Councillor Redden's point. But I don't know what to do with this.
Well,
Because
if I
it's
could
just
go
they're
back-
just telling us.
I could just go back to where we are in the procedure. Councillor Redden raised a point of order.
Hmm,
So the motion is not yet, hasn't been seconded, and it's not on the floor.
right.
What I'd like to do, Councillor Redden, in response to your point of order, could I put the motion on the floor and have it debated, and you can make your point? Would that respond to your point of order adequately?
I think that's acceptable. It keeps everything moving.
Thank you. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Sheridan seconds the motion on the floor.
The motion was never put all the way on the floor.
Oh, it wasn't read out in full, was it?
No.
Deputy Warden, could you read it again, please?
6.9, recommendation report. Fire Services Capital Withdrawal, Lawrencetown Volunteer Fire Department. That municipal council authorize the Lawrencetown and District Volunteer Fire Department to proceed with obtaining quotes for a replacement tanker.
And Councillor Sheridan, you second that? Okay. Councillor Redden, would you like to speak? Oh, sorry. I do see. I think I'll go to Deputy Warden. You've got your hand up. And then
Thank
I'll
you.
come back.
Thank you. And the way I read this, Warden, through you, is that we're not telling them to go buy a new fire truck, that we're authorizing them for something to go ahead for something that they've already mentioned to us that they're going to be getting or looking toward buying. We're just authorizing it. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Redden?
Sorry, I mean, my comments are there before. It's our policy is about who these mutual aid providers are. And then there's section 6 about grants. And it says they have to give us 60 days notice, but they've not gotten their tenders yet. So they can't be in compliant with looking for a grant. And to me, you're kind of pre-authorizing something that yet you haven't come into compliance for yet. I mean, and I don't think this is a problem with our policy having things in cart before the horse. I think it's the motion is the cart before the horse. I mean, if they want to go get tenders for a fire truck for fighting fires and skyscrapers at, $3 million a pop, well, good for them to get the tenders and good for the salesman who wastes his time filling that tender. Why are we passing anything on it? I mean, if they want to tell us that they're going looking for a truck in a year, well, okay, then they send us a letter and staff makes a note of it and puts it in the file. And then the grant's there. There's, as the CAO pointed out in our last discussion about a firefighter grant, we're kind of obligated to give them these funds whether we like it or not. I mean, that's why we were raising these funds from the public as essentially an area rate, as I understand it, is for the fire department. So the whole idea that they have to jump through all these extra hoops, and again, this is in part me just disagreeing on the interpretation of policy with staff, which is fine. We're all allowed to, disagree on that. I don't see that this is here. Like, they talk about urgency, and they've now waited at least 1 week, if not a couple weeks, before they go get tenders. And it should just be done and gone. That's all I have to say, I guess.
Councillor Longmire, you had your hand up?
Thank you. I go back to the recommendation, the municipal council authorize, and I do hear what Councillor Redden is actually saying. I don't think council has any authority to authorize them. Proactively, they're doing their part. Perhaps this comes back to where we were with Annapolis and clearly policy confusion on processes. So perhaps we need to go back to that with all the departments sooner than later. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Sheridan?
So if this does not get approved and we take it off of our agenda, what happens with the Lawrencetown Fire Services? Are they going to be in the same boat that the Annapolis Fire Department was put in? This is my question. Thank you. Could staff answer that for me, please?
What's Ms. Campbell?
So the practice and policy that has been followed has been twofold. There's a purpose for ensuring that because we have fiduciary responsibility on behalf of the taxpayers and how money is given out to be spent, that they follow some kind of procedure, which is a tender or quote process, to make sure that it's a fair and transparent process that they have followed to purchase the truck. So that's the first thing. And that's incorporated into the policy. And the other purpose here is to identify that the truck that's being replaced was one that was identified under the funding formula. And so because of that twofold reason, this is why this is coming forward to council as an awareness that there will be a request to withdraw funds at the time that they have completed receiving quotes or tenders.
Thank you.
And it is necessary, yes.
Any other comments?
Nope.
I don't see any, so I will call for the vote. Madam Clerk, would you read the motion again?
Yeah, just give me a moment. It was moved by Deputy Warden Gunn, seconded by Councillor Sheridan, that municipal council authorize the Lawrencetown and District Volunteer Fire Department to proceed with obtaining quotes for a replacement tanker.
All those in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Opposed? One opposed. Thank you very much, Council. Move along to the
6.10.
6:10, yes.
6.10, recommendation report, Fire Services Capital Withdraw, North Queens Fire Association. That municipal council authorized the North Queens Fire Association to proceed with the acquisition of a replacement utility rescue vehicle and funds to come from the 2021-22 Fire Services Capital Reserve in the amount of $40,000, with the option to withdraw additional funds from the capital reserve when funds are made available in the future capital reserve funds.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Bartow seconds. Discussion? Councillor Bartow? You're muted, Councillor Bartow.
Yeah, there. Working on it. Thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up some points. No way I want to cause trouble for North Queens, but I think policies should be applied equally. If we're laying it on one department, we need to apply it to others. I noted in the data that's included in the package, perhaps to be fair, we need to give reminders or comments to all instead of approving one and not approving another. It was in their minutes that they submitted that they approved, that they actually passed to purchase a new truck from Lance Auto Body, truck body, and that was in October. Where's my notes here? October 4th, 21. And their letters of awareness from the Annapolis County Fire Services Association wasn't until February 28th. As well, the letter to the county requesting funds wasn't until the 28th, or it wasn't until the February. And I think it was around that same time of the month, which is close to 5 months after they approved the purchase. So why are they being treated differently? I no way. I think that they should have the money, but it's the policy thing that I'm getting back to again. In no way Annapolis should be penalized when they actually said they weren't going to do anything without a signed contract, which wasn't done. It was perception. And then North Queens actually passed the motion to purchase back in October and come for money in the end of February, the last day in February. So I just for clarification, I'd like to have somebody respond to that and ask why they're being treated differently. Thank you.
Someone on staff that can respond to Councillor Bartow's inquiry, Ms. Mason.
Thank you, Warden. When the request came to me in February, they had held off with a decision. They intend to take action in May to purchase a truck. So they realized that they needed to come forward when I had a conversation with them. And so they have, my understanding is they have not done any purchasing at this point, but they're certainly, their intention was to do it in May. So they have given us, it says we prefer to have 60 days prior to any approval for them to purchase anything. They also were not aware they actually still had funds in their capital reserve.
I guess I'll just back to the point of when they made the decision to do the truck. I think the policy needs to be, reviewed and applied equally to all departments. And just wanted to make that point. Like I said, I have no problem giving them the funds, releasing the funds to them, but it's just going back to policy again. Thank you.
I have Councillor Longmire and Councillor Redden on my list. I'll go to Councillor Longmire. I saw you first.
Thank you, Warden. I couldn't agree more with everything that Councillor Bartow has shared with that. And certainly I don't want to hold back any opportunity for funding to proceed forward. I would like to just ask the question around when departments are holding off or delaying making decisions or purchases or whatnot. Sorry, not purchases, but delays in their process. How do they convey that to the county? Do they provide it in letter form, email format, or is it a telephone call recorded? I think it's really important that we start tightening up on how we receive all of that information, just so that we can have a complete kind of package. It's really hard to navigate through, and I think that's where we're getting tangled up in this policy stuff, is we're not getting the exact the perfect or close to perfect information equally for all. And I think that does go back to what Councillor Bartow has said, the policy confusion. I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Longmire. Councillor Redden.
So initially I was very happy with this report, but I had missed Councillor Bartow's points. And so I've now heard that fire departments need to give us advance notice of an unspecified time, or they need to give us 60 days notice. And we also have a information here where the department is explicitly contravening our policy, and we have a recommendation from staff to approve it. Whereas we've approved one before that was not recommended by staff, where the only evidence presented that the department was not in compliance with policy was hearsay and accusations that I had left out before, that it was essentially calling the fire chief a liar. And I must say, I am very displeased with the quality of reports coming to this council.
Okay, any other comments? Councillor Hudson, I see you. Councillor Connell. I'll go to Hudson first and then Connell.
Yes, thank you very much, Warden. I would just like to talk about this vehicle that they are purchasing. In the past, we've been told that basically there's been some baselines established for equipment that all the fire departments need. I guess my question is, and I guess those baselines have to do with the the buildings, the fire trucks and so on and so forth. Now, this is not a fire truck. So is this within those baselines? Use, for example, Lawrencetown Fire Department, they have a baseline for the trucks that, they have in their shop, right? If they were going to go out and buy a utility vehicle, is that outside of their baseline or not? Just like this, some response regarding the baseline vehicles. I don't know if this particular one falls within the baseline.
Ms. Campbell?
Yes, it's within the baseline of equipment that was identified in the original funding formula. Would it be permissible, Warden, for me to also respond to the previous discussion from Councillor Redden?
Sure, go ahead.
So the distinction that I see here as a staff person is a fire department which had announced on Facebook about the purchase of a chassis prior to any notification to the county versus a fire department now coming to the county, making us aware that they're going to do it. That is, purchase a chassis once the funds are available. That's the distinction that I see, and that's what is reflected in the report and is in accordance with the policy and past practice.
Thank you. Councillor Cotw?
Yes, and that's what I see is that once Queens realized that they didn't follow the policy, if it's true, they put their purchase on hold until they got the notification from the council that go ahead. So I see that's the difference. We can argue the policy to death, but the policy was put in place many years ago by another council. That's the policy we're following today. If we're going to upgrade it, it needs to be upgraded. Like Councilor Longmire said, lots of our policies have to be upgraded because we have 11 new councilors around this table that are thinking differently than the last 11 councilors. Some of them are still here, but even their thoughts are changing on subjects. So all we're doing is we're asking staff to follow the policies. And I think they've done that. Once they had notified Queens that they got to give 60 days, they put their purchase on hold. Because if everyone knew the history of some of these policies, when the policies were put in place, the fire departments, we supported buying a service vehicle, utility vehicle, but we didn't sponsor Jaws of Life for every fire department. It was a necessity to some fire departments, the same as the boat rescue and stuff like that. But they were very catty and very, very intelligent, thinking outside the box. And all of a sudden we realized that every new utility vehicle that was purchased for fire departments, the Jaws of Life came as part of the package. So they outwitted what our thinking was, and just cause. I mean, they felt they needed Jaws of Life, and probably every fire department did need Jaws of Life. So sometimes policies are manipulated on both sides. Sometimes that everyone reads them differently, but I feel that if Queens put a hold on their truck, realized they should have gave county notice, they did the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw your hand up, Councillor Bartow, but I'll go to Councillor LeBlanc because you've already spoken. I'll come back to you after Councillor LeBlanc. Go ahead, Councillor LeBlanc.
We have discussed policy for a long time. I have suggested that we have an evening or a day or whatever on set every month so that we can go through all these policies, because as was mentioned before, there's a lot of them that have to be revamped, and staff is doing exactly what the policy says, and that is their job. So if we need to revamp the policies, then we should get down to it and possibly start looking at each individual policy. However, I know that this policy is going to be looked after because the CAO and Dawn, Ms. Campbell, and have already spoken about it. But it is definitely a suggestion that we should be everything is different for each different fire department, but it has been followed by the people that have looked through that policy many more years than I have, to what the differences are. So I thank them for that. So I wouldn't want to have to decipher that. I'll tell you right now. And the other thing is, I think we should definitely think of a policy meetings so that we can go through them, just like most other counselors have said. And we're still putting it on the back burner. So maybe we shouldn't be putting it on the back burner. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is your hand up, Deputy Warden?
Well, no, I was just kind of leaning on it, but since you've asked, I will add a little bit in here. Thank you. Policy is meant to be followed. I mean, yeah, that's what we should be following, is the policy we laid out. In the last few years since I've been here, you know, I've seen times when policy wasn't really met or followed. And also the requirements of the MGA not followed or met. And I'm not going to sit here and dig these times up or anything. I'm not interested in that. But I'm just saying that policy is meant to be followed. And we should be very clear on what our policies state, and then they should be followed. Thank you. And if that needs a workshop of some sort to go over our policies, then that's what we should have. Thank you.
Councillor Bartow?
I guess I had my hand up before some other councillors spoke, so I think the issue has been covered substantially. So any further comments I had were kind of already taken care of in the meantime. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Longmire?
Thank you, Warden. Just one last comment from me. Again, I agree with Councillor Bartow. We need to be, and as well, Deputy Warden Gunn, we need to be clear on our policies. But when they affect other groups and parties around us, we have an obligation to educate so that they can be brought current and ask questions so that they understand them completely. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on this topic? I think it's been a while since the motion was read, so I'll ask the clerk to read the motion before we vote.
It was moved by Deputy Warden Gunn, seconded by Councillor Bartow, that Municipal Council authorize the North Queens Fire Association to proceed with the acquisition of a replacement utility rescue vehicle with funds to come from the 2021-22 Fire Services Capital Reserve in the amount of $40,000, with the option to withdraw additional funds from the capital reserve when funds are made available in future capital reserve funds.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Those opposed? Are you a nay, Councillor Bartow? You're muted. You're muted, Councillor Bartow.
Sorry about that. We need to have a discussion period after the motion is read. I had a comment to put in on that as far as the motion, the way it is read. On the previous motion with the Annapolis Rural Fire Department, we chose to remove the 21-22 fiscal year off of that one. Should we not be treating this similarly?
I'm afraid that the motion was voted on and passed, and
yeah, but I was trying to get your attention before it was voted on, because the motion was read, but it wasn't seconded after the reading.
No,
so
the motion was read and seconded a long
and
time
then there
ago.
wasn't an opportunity for me to talk. That's why I was trying to get your attention.
Okay, well,
It was based on the way the motion was presented, and that was the only opportunity I had to respond to that.
no, the motion was read by the deputy warden and it was seconded, and previously the motion was amended. Councillor Hudson in the previous one had moved to amend it. And so there was discussion. I looked around, there was no further discussion. The practice is I have the motion read before we vote. So I'm
So-
afraid, I'm
So we,
afraid
did
we
did we vote? I never voted on that.
Well, then we all,
My question would be on the number in the vote, Warden.
yeah. So how do you wish to vote, Councillor Barto, if you didn't vote?
I guess I would be voting for it, but just for the way things are written and the way we were doing based on the history of the previous motion for a similar topic, that we removed that year period on it. It hit me that I should bring that up. And I would be remiss if I hadn't done that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate what you're saying, Councillor Barto. And thank you for your vote, but hopefully it won't become an issue. So we'll move along to the next item on the agenda.
611, 6.11.
Just a minute, I've lost my page here, if you don't mind. Hold on a sec. Yeah, 6.11.
Yes, and I'm going to read it right from the sheet. That recommendation that municipal council authorize staff to conduct the 2022 mandatory review of polling districts and to follow the criteria established by the Utility and Review Board, UARB, preparing information on status quo 11, 9, and 7 districts for the presentation to the public, and that municipal council determine the scope of the input participation process to allow the residents of the county of Annapolis to have an input in the boundary study.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Longmire seconds. Before we begin, I'd like to just invite Mr. Dick, just if he could set out the next step after we conclude the discussion, what he anticipates the next step to be.
Actually, Mr. Ward, maybe I'll ask the clerk if she can have that discussion with council.
Sure.
Sure. So this is a mandatory review. It's required in the MGA every 8 years. What the Utility and Review Board lays out a process, and a submission has to be made to the Utility and Review Board on the number of polling districts in the county of Annapolis. That has to be done before the end of this calendar year, December 2022. In order to make a submission to the Utility and Review Board, council must determine where staff should spend their time providing to develop information present to the public. The recommendation is that municipal council consider 11, 9, and 7 districts, because the Utility and Review Board won't accept you just saying we want to remain the same. The Utility and Review Board will require that at least some options have been taken to the public to be decided before you decide what your submission will be. So the motion, again, is just a recommendation from staff. If council doesn't like those numbers for staff to work on, you can amend your motion. It just has to start somewhere, and it has to be completed this year. So the staff recommendation is to review status quo and 2 other options. That's what's before you. Did I answer the question?
I think my only question was, in a discussion I had with Mr. Dick the other day, the suggestion was we might have a special committee of the whole meeting on this topic, as opposed to deciding things today. Can someone clarify the process for me? Mr. Dick, are we going to have a separate special committee of the whole meeting, or are we supposed to decide these things today? You're muted, Mr. Dick.
That's really a decision council has to make. If there's enough information in this to make that decision. And if there isn't, then we will have a further meeting with council.
Yeah. All right, so we'll proceed with the discussion. Councillor Connell.
Yeah, in my mind, we're just making a decision that those three options are okay with us. We're not making any decision which one we're doing because we're waiting. We got to wait and see what the public participation brings forth to add that into our decision of council. So today it's not making a decision. Only the fact is that those three options are going to be looked at.
Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Bartow.
Are these options that staff has presented, or did UARB have input to request that we use these options?
Someone from staff respond to that?
If I may.
Madam Clerk?
These options are presented by staff, and staff have been through this process several times before. I would like to maybe just give a bit of background. The last boundary review was commenced in 2014. As you know, the town of Bridgetown dissolved, not amalgamated, dissolved in 2015. So we were given a one-year extension at that time. In the same year, a neighboring municipality wanted to remain with the same number of seats that they had. And the UARB told them how many seats fewer they would have. So what has happened in 2014, 2015, is that the municipality of the County of Annapolis actually increased its political seats by 5. So by taking on the town of Bridgetown, the County of Annapolis actually had 16 seats. And we proceeded with 11 plus 1 until the election. So we proceeded with 11, and the UARB determined that that technically was a reduction in the amount of seats. I believe, having watched the UARB process a few times, that they will be looking for you to reduce. I do not know that. I'm just going by past experience and how I've seen it unfold here and in other jurisdictions. So that, yes, today's motion is just, there's a lot of work behind bringing something further to you. So if you can direct staff that these are what you'd like to look at, I always assume status quo. But knowing that other municipalities have submitted status quo and been told that they are reducing and how many they're reducing by. Really, you have to be realistic and look at it here. So because there's a lot of work by our GIS technician, and these she provided a sample in this a really high scale sample of what they would look like before final work is done. He would be consulting with each of you. There's all the conditions that are required by the UARB to move forward, but in order to present something to you, we have to have direction on what it is you would like to see. And that's where the big discussion will happen, is once you see these different presentations.
Thank you for your clarification.
Councillor LeBlanc, just a sec, I've lost track. Councillor Bartow, did you raise your questions? You did, right? I didn't check.
I did, and I just interjected just to thank Carolyn for her explanation. It was very clear and concise.
I had Councillor LeBlanc next, and then I saw Councillor Sheridan. Councillor LeBlanc?
I'm good for now, thank you.
All right, Councillor Sheridan.
So I was just looking into this, and this is just for information purposes, but in Kings County, for example, they have 10 councillors, including the mayor. They have over 60,000 people in Kings County. So we have approximately over 20,000 in Annapolis with 11 counselors. So I can see where the UAB are coming from. And I understand that they will be looking for a decision from us. But I just want to throw that out there just for thoughts so you can understand their way of thinking as well. Yes, I'd like to remain the same. However, times do change and things have to be adjusted. Thank you.
Councillor Longmire?
Thank you, Warden. I definitely believe that we are upon a time where we need to revisit the number of counselors. You know, financially, it's expensive. We don't have, as Councillor Sheridan has just stated, we have approximately 18,000 citizens. So the cost is much. We cannot look at this as a career. You know, there's many things that need to be worked through this. You know, do we set terms, you know, reasonably? You know, the boundaries are going to get much broader if we do reduce it down. I, you know, looking at it, see the 7 as a great place to land. But yes, I think a special meeting would be necessary in order to work through all of the background. And I would like to thank Carolyn for, you know, recognizing that we don't have everything we need in order to make any clear decision. Thanks.
Anyone else? Councillor Prout?
Thank you. Yes, that was one of my questions I jotted here on page 68. I was wondering about like detailed boundaries. We can look at the map and say, oh, okay, we've all expanded under the first option of 9 and the second option of 7. And I think when we do have I assume whether it's a committee of the whole, special committee of the whole, how we go about it, we'll need more information on those other 2 options. I know some of you are saying, oh, it's easy for Councillor Prout to speak. He's got that little postage stamp area, and I am aware of that. And but I would say I'm above average in that I have 3% more under the current standard, or 3% less, sorry. But yeah, looking at some of them there geographically, I'm thinking of mainly the southern 3 sections under what is it, 4 and 6, and I believe it's dark blue. My eyes are having adjusting here. 4, 5, and 6. Those are huge geographic areas. You know, there's one thing to be said for the status quo, and I do get Councillor Sheridan's point is well taken as far as population goes. But we're all familiar with, you know, if we get a call from someone, you can say, oh, I know where that is. I know what you're talking about. Let me see what I can do. I know we'll have to give due consideration to all 3 options, status quo, options 2 and 3. But I think it's important that we have detailed boundaries of what's what. We can look at them, or most of us can, and say, okay, I see the change. I understand the change, but we've got lots for discussion in my belief. Thank you.
Anyone else? Deputy Warden?
Thank you. Yeah, I can well see a need for a reduction in districts in Annapolis County. We have 11 now. That's a lot of counselors and a lot of people to come to some sort of an agreement. The job of counselors becoming less as the years go by, you know, with the regionalization models that the province is sort of guiding us toward, and one thing and another, the job of a counselor is becoming less. In the future, we won't deal even with our waste problems, right? Because it'll just be a number and say, listen, you go to this number here and you call them up and they'll deal with your waste problems. You know, roads, we don't deal with roads. You know, I can call the Department of Infrastructure Renewal, and by God, you know, in most fact, they're quite good. But, you know, still they're on a budget and time constraints and one thing and another. Our property valuation, they took that years ago. We don't deal with property valuations anymore. The municipality used to do that. That was part of their purview. Our school system, there used to be part of our purview. Our medical system years ago was part of our purview. You know, we don't have that anymore. So the need for all of these counselors in Annapolis County, I think, is becoming less and less. So we'll have to think about that. Thank you.
Councilor LeBlanc?
On that note, I think the bottom line to this is we still have a lot of things to look at. And the UARB will certainly have a lot of influence on what's going to happen, and the public. And to look at this in a way that we escaped, I guess it's a word, in 2014, 2015 because of the dissolution of Bridgetown. Going through UARB and basically, well, we did, but we, you know, losing counselors at that time. And that was the only reason why the numbers did not go down. So I think to be optimistic that there will be a change, no matter how we look at it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Redden?
I guess back during the election, mostly I heard from some residents about the mayor versus the warden system. Is that an appropriate thing to have attached to this sort of conversation, public consultation? I mean, I'm sure it'll come up. I'm just wondering if we should have it attached more firmly.
Mr. Dick, I did have a discussion with Mr. Dick about this, but Mr. Dick, maybe you might want to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I believe that's a consideration that council wants to entertain. Now is the time to do it. And I'm not sure what council and the community's view is, but certainly it would expand the engagement that we have right now in terms of the voter realignment. But it's better to do it now if council is thinking that that's the direction they want to go.
So that would need to be decided before a boundary review.
Right.
It's a whole separate process.
Anyone else? Councilor Cotw?
We just have to keep in mind that it's always been said, always been taunted that county councilors are the closest to the people.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you dilute councilors, just make sure we don't dilute them to the point where we're not closest to the people.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? I don't see anybody, so I would like to ask some questions. So Deputy Warden, would you take the chair?
Yes, sir.
I just want to have some discussion about the process. When I read the motion, I guess the first point I want to make is that if in fact the issue of the mayor or warden system is on the table, then the number of counselors, I would assume, would have to be 10, 8, or 6, rather than 11, 9, and 7, so that the mayor could vote to break a tie, which would mean that the staff would have to create different mock-ups of what the different districts would look like. So I raise that as just to put that on the table. The second thing about the process is, and I asked Mr. Dick or someone else on staff to correct me if my understanding of where we're going on this is correct. It seems to me that today we're not deciding between 11, 9, and 7, or even 10, 8, and 6, that staff are going to start the process. And then at some point, either at the next committee of the whole meeting or a special committee of the whole meeting, council is going to decide whether they want 11, 9, or 7. I'll put it that way. And then the motion says that have to determine the scope of the public participation process. So one of my questions to staff is, if whatever we decide on 11, 9, and 7, does council then have a voice, a vote or input on how those are arranged? We've seen some drafts here. Is that going to come back and are we going to be discussing that, or do we accept that depending on 9, 7, 11, 9, or 7? And then the public participation process, are we going to have like one meeting? Is it going to be in person? Are we going to go around to the 11 districts to have everybody have an input? So could someone on staff, I know we're not deciding this today, but just so I understand where we're going, tell me whether the mayor warden thing will be on the table. If so, are we going to do 6, 8, or 10? And secondly, what's the public participation process going to look like? So can somebody help me out, Madam Clerk?
Okay, so having a mayor is a whole separate question outside of this. So if you were going to decide to go with that, we would need to know before we prepare the mapping. So if I can go back. So today you're not dividing if it is 11 or 9, or deciding if it is 11 or 9 or 7, but staff need to know if that is the information you want to receive, because there is a lot of work with communities of interest, contiguous roads, and there's a lot of work that will have to go behind each of these. So today, if you go with the motion, staff will be preparing information on 11, 9, and 7. That has to come back to council, and councilors will be individually spoken with. Do you see this community as having their commerce here? Or it's a very detailed process. So we need to know going in what information you want to come back. Today, we're asking for 11, 9, and 7, unless you make those numbers different in the motion. Public participation, this will affect the whole county. So there will have to be presentations of whatever, if you decide on 11, 9, and 7, then those options of 11, 9, and 7 will have to go to at least every district in one place, because it will affect everybody. Even now with status quo, with the census, new census numbers in it, those boundaries change. So today is important because today will direct staff on what information you need to come back. Right now, it does not include the question of mayor. That's a separate process that I'd even have to look into to see how that goes.
Thank you. If I could just ask a follow-up, Deputy Warden, to that. So if I understand it correctly, we decide, I'll leave the mayoralty thing out of the picture. We decide at some upcoming meeting between 11, 9, and 7. And then we go for public participation. And then it comes back to council for a final decision on 11,
Yes.
9, or 7?
Yes, so if council wants, if those are what council wants to consider and wants the public to consider before they make a decision on what they are going to submit to the UARB, that's why you have to have options presented to the public so that you are then informed by the public and you can make a decision on your submission to the UARB.
So the council won't make a decision on 11, 9, or 7 until after the public participation process. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. You'll see that this is called report number 1. There'll be many.
Thank you for that. I'll take the chair back. Thank you, Deputy Warden. Councillor Hudson.
Yes, just hearing this discussion. the mayor warden scenario, do you not think that we should decide on where we would like to go with that before we move ahead? Just my thought.
Well, I'm going to leave that to council to decide. Any other comments, Councillor Connell?
Many of us don't have the information given to us or in front of us on how a mayor council works versus a warden council works. So to me, I wouldn't want to vote on something that may be good, but it may be bad too for the county. So until we get the clarification on how a mayor council authorities work, we know what a warden counselor's protocol is, because that's what we followed for eons. But a mayor council we have no information on exactly how that runs, how it who has the authority, what authorities the mayor has versus what authorities the warden has. I think there's a lot of information we don't have to make that decision right today.
Any other comments? I think I saw Councillor Bartow's hand up, and I see Councillor Redden, and I see Councillor Hudson. So I'll start with Councillor Bartow.
Thank you, Warden. I guess I have concerns that we don't get the cart ahead of the horse. I've listened to the other comments, and we do need, as Councillor Connell said, clarification on the mayor warden alternatives. If we don't have that, and if we move forward with these options that is presented to us in our package, we could just be wasting time and then having to redo it again if we happen to decide to go a different route with the mayor warden issue. So I'm not sure how crucial this is in the time frame where we have to submit this to the URB for their concurrence. But if we are going to do it proactively and do it correctly, now that it has been brought up, the option of the mayor versus warden, I'm thinking that we need to table these county boundary issues until we decide that, so that we can move forward with that new information. You know, we might decide that we don't do that, and we're right back where we are now, and with these packages. But we don't know that until we get 11 votes from the current council to dictate the direction that we're going. And to do that, we can't do that today without the information that we can digest and review as to what that would mean. One other question is, in the mayor system, now we have the warden system. It's warden and we have a deputy warden. What happens with the mayor system? Is there all of a sudden a deputy mayor as well? And is that going to change the number of councillors again? So I really not clear on that. It seems to me that that we might end up paying more money for less councillors with a changeover to the mayor system. So anyway, there's more questions than answers at this point, and I think that if we table it for now, have a month to review things. I know it's a terrible time with ramping up for budgets. You know, that maybe we set a future date to deal with this. In the meantime, we can have more information circulated around the council. Thank you.
I see the clerk with her hand up. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
If I could just interject a comment here. You are required to have a boundary review this year. you may consider mayor versus warden at any time under the MGA Section 12. But you're required to do a boundary review this year, complete with public participation before the end of December this year.
So that gives us 10 months to look after that. I mean, what I was saying is we didn't have to do it today. I'm not saying put it off till next year. I'm just saying that put it off till we get proper information.
You could put off the question of mayor warden until another year.
Okay, but then would that force another boundary review? And
It would probably be, it would be considered for the next boundary review.
yeah, so it would have to be done, prior to the next election.
Yes.
Councillor Redden?
I thought I was asking a relatively simple question. I hadn't really meant to make such a huge cascade. I should really know better than to ask, but I think are simple questions, I guess, in council now. I really wanted to interrupt here to speak here. I agree with Councillor Connell that I just asked a question. I don't have any information. I am as lost as all of us here. And I think we should wait on the mayor warden question, and I'm happy to proceed with the district review here.
Councillor Hudson, did you want to speak again on this?
No, I think everything I want to say has been already said.
Are there any other Councillor Prout?
Thank you. I'm inclined to agree with the comments that have been made that we move ahead on the boundary issue and let the warden mayor issue be resolved. And we'll need public input for both of those. But I think the key thing now is to look at the boundaries and let staff go ahead with their preparations on that. And when we have them, we can, we're going to need an amount of time, as we're going to need with other issues we're facing in the next 10 months, to go to the public and seek their input. And to me, that's the key, as opposed to the warden versus mayor issue. Thank you.
Any other comments? There's a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. It's before you. Would anyone like to have it read before we vote? Councillor Barto, you would. So Madam Clerk, would you read it, please?
It was moved by Deputy Warden Gunn, seconded by Councillor Longmire, that Municipal Council authorize staff to conduct the 2022 mandatory review of polling districts and follow the criteria established by the Utility and Review Board, preparing information on status quo 11, 9, and 7 districts for presentation to the public, and that Municipal Council determine the scope of the public participation process to allow the residents of the County of Annapolis to have input on the boundary study.
Thank you for that. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Opposed, motion's carried. Thank you very much. 6:12, let me look at my watch. Maybe we'll break now and come back at 1 o'clock. I think we're making good progress today.
Yep.
So we'll come back at 1 o'clock and deal with 6:12. Okay, welcome everybody. This is the resumption of the Committee of the Whole meeting for the Municipality of the County of Annapolis. The next item on the agenda is 6:12, which is a motion in support of the Ukraine. And I know that Councillor LeBlanc has been working on a motion, so I'll invite her to put a motion on the floor.
Thank you. There are 2 motions, and yes, I was asked to make motions, so I enlisted the help of Councillor Morrison. So here's the first motion. I move that Municipal Council send a letter to express to the Ambassador of Ukraine to Canada and to all Ukrainians everywhere its complete support as Ukraine defends its democratic independence against an unlawful invasion of its democratic homeland.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Prout. Did you get it, Madam Clerk?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Discussion? Councillor Longmire?
Thank you, Warden. It's a really difficult, certainly most painful time for Ukraine. They're having to arm young and old, regular people. They're separating them from their families. We've seen the media, we've seen the coverage on the news. It's beyond our comprehension. Heart-wrenching at best. But the loss on both sides is something that I want to bring here today. Russia in itself they're silenced. Their leader, not allowing the voices to be heard, the loss there, the silence, all that they will feel and experience through this not in support of their leader needs to be as well recognized. So I want to recognize today both sides, Ukraine and the Russian people. Thank you.
Anyone else? Deputy Warden?
Thank you. As I have explained to council by email, I'm not convinced that it's within our jurisdiction to support people on either side of this war, and believe it's not in the mandate of a municipal government to do so. These are federal matters, and our obligation is to find the most cost-effective way to provide local services. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Deputy Warden, did you vote?
No, I didn't, sir. I abstain. Thank you.
Can't abstain.
I don't think you can abstain. I think the clerk indicated that if you don't vote, it's considered to be in the affirmative. Is that right, Madam Clerk?
That's correct.
And that's right.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, Councillor LeBlanc, you said that you had two motions?
Correct. The second motion, I'm going to need assistance from the CAO in a few seconds. I move that municipal council make a donation of $500 to the Red Cross to assist the Ukrainians in this time of need. And first of all, I know we need to place where this money is going to come from. So that's where the CAO will be stepping in to indicate where that money could come from.
Mr. Dick, can you add to that motion?
It will come out of our grant fund.
Okay, so I would. So Madam Clerk, should I reread it or do you have from the grant fund?
Yeah, I've added that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Sheridan seconds. Discussion? I don't see any hands up.
Well, summary.
Sorry, you want to say something, Deputy
Yes.
Warden?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Summary, I've got a summary here about sending money. As I've indicated to the councillors and some staff, I believe it is within our individual powers to write MPs to voice our perspectives about what's happening in Ukraine. But I don't believe we have the authority to spend taxpayers' money in this way. I suggest making donations individually, not speaking for the money of the municipality. I believe it's a significant overreach of our authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sheridan?
Could I ask staff if this is within our policy to make a donation?
Mr.
It is.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I don't see any, so I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
One nay. Motion's passed. Thank you very much, council. We'll move along to 7.1, which is the CAO report. Just let me find it here in my own 76.
72, I believe.
72, is it? Sorry. Yeah.
72.
Mr. Dick, is there anything you would like to add to your voluminous and lengthy report?
No, Mr. Ward, no.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the CAO? Councillor Hudson? You're muted, Councillor Hudson.
Yeah, earlier in the meeting, you asked me to ask the CAO about the water keepers.
Okay, do you want to expand that a bit, Councillor Hudson, exactly?
Well,
what-
I guess the staff was to contact the environment or, yeah, regarding reports and information and so on and so forth. I was just wondering if that had been done, and if so, what was the result?
Mr. Dick?
I did report on that the week after we met with the Water Keepers. Council asked for some additional information, and I hate to say this, but it's not at the top of my priority list at this point.
Okay. Councillor Longmire?
Thank you, Warden. I just would like to ask, and I guess it would be remiss not to consider reviewing our COVID-19 policies 2.7.8, 2.7.9 as we approach April, and it's going to be a busy month with budget and whatnot, and we're going to be challenged with how we open up as a county office, etc. So, you know, meetings, coming together in chambers, all of those things. So I'm just wondering if we would be able to revisit that, as our policies always suggest we should. So I just thought that this was an opportunity to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Was that a question or just a comment? Sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, a question. Sorry, Warden. So how would we do that?
Dawn, if you'd like to respond to that, please.
Sure. Last Thursday, we participated in a seminar for all AMA Association members in regards to COVID vaccination policies and COVID response policies. The suggestion of legal counsel for AMA and also simultaneously our own labor lawyer was that we didn't need to rush to undo the vaccination policy, particularly if, as in our circumstance, everyone was already vaccinated, that it might be judicious to take some time of perhaps a month after the loosening of restrictions on the 21st to see whether the pandemic continues to ease or whether something else as far as the crisis unfolds. So I did communicate that with the CAO, and he confirmed that he thought that would be a wise way to go. So we do have that subject to review probably within 4 weeks after the 21st. In regards to our COVID response policy, in consultation with our labor lawyer, Noella Martin, we did write it in such a way that it only has effect during a time either of state of provincial emergency or during the pandemic. In other words, it has no effect if there isn't a pandemic going on and or if a state of emergency isn't going on. By doing that, should the pandemic arise again or should a state of emergency be put back into effect, our policy would also similarly come back into effect. In regards to access to the building, that falls under the standard operating procedure that's put in place by the CAO, and primarily under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. It might be useful additionally for me to say that the wording of the vaccination policy is that it applies to employees. We have 100% vaccination of all of our employees at the moment. Because it is council's policy, should council deem that councillors meet the definition of employees, it would be up to council to determine how they would enforce that in regards to councillors, because we as staff do not have the authority to impose or restrict councillors in any way in such matter as that.
Thank you, Dawn, for that. I so appreciate that.
Are there any other questions for the CAO? Councillor Hudson?
Yes, I was wondering if Mr. CAO Dick would just, I guess, refresh my memory. What was that ombudsman report back in 2021? What was that regarding?
That was regarding Maria Mazak, who lives out in, I'm not exactly sure what district it is. It's in Councillor Connell's district, and she was complaining about the smell of horse and cow manure at the farm property next to her place.
Oh, okay.
Councillor Connell?
And I do believe she sold since then, so she isn't even living there now.
And that's correct.
Thank you. Councillor LeBlanc?
Yes, thank you. Your last thing about the mountains and meadows. You had a discussion with politicians about available funding. What can you tell us what available funding there could be there to help out?
So one of the big concerns we had was the funding sources available for the extension of the sewer network.
Yes.
When we met with the elected officials, subsequent to that meeting, we were informed that our IPIC funding could cover more than one project. And up until that point, we had made application for the Bear River project. They advised us that day that we could have 2 projects on the books at one time.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Any other questions for the CAO? Deputy Warden?
Thank you. Can I make a motion to receive his report?
It's only circulated for information, so you don't really need to receive it.
Exchange. Thank you.
Thank you.
It has changed, yeah.
Any other questions for CAO Dick? Seeing none, then I'll move along. Next is my warden's report. If I can just find it here. Notes. Since the last committee of the whole meeting, I've done the usual things, meetings with the CAO, signing checks. The only thing really worth reporting on, and stop me if I already have, because I have a memory that I've already discussed this. With respect to the pilot project, the IMSA pilot project, I was dragooned, I'm going to use that word, into being on the hiring committee to hire the executive director and chief financial officer who were going to run this 2-year project. On the hiring committee with me are Sandra Snow, the mayor of Kentville, Scott Conrad, the CAO at Kings, and Aaron Baudouin, the CAO at Wolfville. We sent out an RFP to fill those positions. With respect to the chief financial officer, we only got 1 response. With respect to the executive director position, we got 14 responses. They also, I say they, I think Aaron Baudouin is the one who sent the material out, also asked for consultants to respond. and we got one consultant's report response. The hiring committee met on February the 17th, and it was our view that none of the applicants met the test. So we recommended to the IMSA group, the working group, which is essentially all the mayors and wardens, that we issue another RFP for a consultant. And with a major change in the RFP, the first RFP that went out for consultants required the consultant to be on site for essentially the 2 years. And the thought was that's why we got very few responses from consultancy firms. So at a meeting on the 18th, the IMSA working group agreed with the report from the hiring committee, and they've put out another RFP only to consultants with respect to doing the work for the pilot project. The responses are to be in, I believe, this Friday. And then there's another meeting of the IMSA group the following Friday. I might have my Fridays off by 1 week, but that's where we are. So other than that, that's really the only matter I have to report on. Are there any questions? Seeing none, then we'll move along. There's a notice of motion. An economic development project. Councillor Barto, would you like to explain to, oh, sorry.
There's still 2 reports, TCTS and King's Transit.
Oh, I was looking at my earlier copy. You're right. Sorry about that. Let me just pull up the one in my package. Next is the Trans-County Transportation Society report on page 77.
73, I think, on some packages.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know why my numbers are off. But you're right. It's on 73.
The index is a little off
Yeah.
the package.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Councillor Prout?
Yes, thank you, if I may. As you are all aware, we had set up a tour of the TCTS operations, and we canceled due to the storm. I've been given 2 possible makeup dates by Nicole Hackensmith, the general manager, and I'd like to just get maybe a show of hands because one is coming up next week, one possible date. The 2 dates that were offered, Wednesday, March the 16th, would be a week from tomorrow, at 1:30 in the afternoon is one date. The other is Wednesday, March 23rd at 10 a.m. in the morning. I can make either date, but the invitation would go to all councillors plus the CAO. We're looking at approximately a 1-hour tour. That almost sounds like Gilligan's Island, if I remember that show. But I noticed when I did contact people for the one that we canceled, that a couple of folks said Wednesday mornings might have, they had other things. So perhaps if anyone has any discussion points, the March 16th at 1:30 in the afternoon works well for TCTS because that at 3:30 that afternoon is our board meeting. So Nicole was thinking she could report to the board how it went, but could I, if with your permission, Mr. Warden, I would ask maybe just a show of hands, who could make either one, and we could reach a consensus if there's one. What about I'm thinking the first one would be at 1:30 in the afternoon on Wednesday, March 16th. Who could make that one?
When you first mentioned it, you said 10 o'clock in the morning, and then the 23rd was 1:30.
Oh no, I'm sorry if I did that. No, it's 1:30 in the afternoon on the 16th, and the 10 o'clock is on the 23rd. 10 o'clock in the morning was on the 23rd. Sorry if I got that wrong there.
Okay.
Councillor Barto.
It looked
So
to me
one-
like
Yeah.
Councillor
Sorry.
Connell was the only one that couldn't make the 16th. Is that right, Councillor Connell? You're muted.
No, I was just waiting to see, actually, I could vote on both. It doesn't really matter.
So,
Um,
sorry, so is there anyone who couldn't make the 16th in the afternoon? Anyone that conflicts with?
Councillor Redden, that's no good for you?
Okay.
Neither date's gonna work for me, so that's
Oh,
fine.
sorry.
Neither one? Okay.
Is
So
there-
I think probably if it's more convenient to the board that we meet on the 16th, maybe we'll do that to Councillor Prout.
Okay, I'll let Nicole know that later today if that works. And sorry, Councillor Redden, my apologies.
The 1:30 on the 16th.
Yes,
Grant,
1:30 on the 16th at the former Bridgetown Distillery, as
yeah,
those of us who remember the former distillery.
you probably
you.
chased more than one of their kegs around the field.
Well, since we're
You
not
don't
in
need to
camera,
talk about it, Bruce.
I will make no further comments. Thank you very much. And look forward to seeing everybody there.
Are there any
1:30, yeah, okay.
Yeah, are there any questions for Councillor Prout with respect to the report from TCTS?
This one does need a motion because it's a report from an outside organization.
Then I move to receive Councillor Brooks' report from TCTS.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councillor Prout. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Next is the King's Transit report, which is page 74 of 84. Are there any questions with respect to that report? Councillor Gunn?
Thank you. I'm looking at on page 75, and I think it's the third paragraph down from like fuel prices remain higher than budgeted. So when we're talking about over budget, that means we've overspent money, right? That's what this paragraph is saying here.
It says that we are over in fuel by 32,000. Yes,
That's right. So we spent 32,000 extra dollars.
yes, and
Thank you.
it's going up at $2 and something.
Scandalous. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a comment, if I could.
Let's go ahead, Councillor LeBlanc.
They have just hired an accounting coordinator for King's Transit because they were using different people to do the budget. So now they're going to have a consistent coordinator. Her name is Cindy McDonald, and she used to work at Acadia for 18 years. So she's come to take her post at King's Transit. Secondly, we have a bus named bus number 62, and our bus number 62 is in and out of that service department more than it's on the road, I think. And there is, we're around $50,000 or so or more in work that's been done on this bus. So we're going to have a bill from that one as well. They've also hired another, it was part-time, but for a term or months, but they've hired a full-time, an extra mechanic at the depot to work on stuff. So there's another thing. And they've increased the bus driver's salary, and it has gone up to $21.08 an hour. So those are the numbers that we're looking at now.
Any questions for Councillor LeBlanc with respect to
These numbers.
East Transit?
They're not great numbers, and you can direct your questions to her, to Mr. Parrish, who's going to take it all over.
Actually, if no one else has any questions, I do have a question for you, Councillor LeBlanc. So Deputy Warden, could you take the
Yes.
chair for a minute?
Yes, sir.
Councillor LeBlanc, my understanding is that we in Annapolis County, we buy our own buses.
Correct.
And during this 2-year pilot project, is there any plan that we're going to buy a bus during that 2 years? Do you know
There's
the
not
answer?
supposed, not that I know of, no, because they're looking, the pilot is supposed to be looking into the effectiveness of the new electric buses. So that, when is the pilot team going to start?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
there you go. There's my question to you.
Yeah, we did discuss that, and thank you for that. So I'll take the chair back. Thank you for your answer to that, to Councillor LeBlanc. The question that she asked, just referring to, was when the pilot project will start, and it doesn't start until we've hired, I say we, they have hired either an executive director or a consultant to start the process. That's when it'll actually start.
Excuse me.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, Deputy Warden.
Thank you so much. This pilot project that we're involved in. So when they take over, when we start this pilot project, will this person that we've hired to run this, will he be the one guiding Valley Waste?
Could before you go on to a different subject,
And the
I
trans,
intervene and ask if you could accept my report?
Yeah, let's do that.
move
Yes,
to-
I agree. I think it's moved to receive the report, King's Transit for information. Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Sheridan seconds. Is there any other discussion about King's Transit? Deputy Warden?
Thank you. When we move to this model with this group up there, will they be the director that we hire? Will he be directing King's Transit?
No. not
Okay.
really.
I'll do my best, Deputy Warden, if I could respond, unless Councillor LeBlanc wants to. I think it might be more for me as the person that's involved in the operation. My understanding is that when the consultant is hired, the consultant will be tearing apart King's Transit and tearing apart Valley Waste and putting them back together again to run more smoothly over the next 10 to 20 years. That's about all I can tell you.
Okay, I'll have to settle with that. Thank you.
Councillor Connell?
But after the 2 years, we still have the ability to vote that we may make a choice just to pay for service for one or either or both.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. We're at the notice of motion then. Is that right, Madam Clerk?
You have to call the question on the motion to receive the report.
Well, thank you for that. I'll call for the question to receive the King's Transit report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you.
Now, Councillor Bartow, you've given a notice of motion with respect to an economic development project, municipal solar energy. Would you like to give council a heads up as to what you have in mind on that?
At the moment, just fleshing out some details, and for the notice of motion, it doesn't require speech at this time, but when next month I should be prepared to give a a detailed report on, I just had some cause for reflection and thinking about a lot of things and how we may move into the future and do something positive. I don't want to get into any details now because, they require a little bit of fleshing out. And that's the purpose of the notice of motion, because to give a little lead time to develop the proposal. And all I could say is that it may be something interesting that the county can get involved with without it being a full business. It'll be something that could generate revenues, and I guess really I'm not prepared to say any more at this point.
That's fine. Thank you, Councillor Bartow. I assume you'll circulate something in writing that the clerk can include in the package for the next month's committee of the whole.
Yes, and I talked to the clerk earlier to establish how I go about this, and we decided that the notice of motion was the appropriate way at this point. And then I will have a package or a write-up for her before the requirements for the next, I guess, a week before the next meeting.
Thank you. Councillor LeBlanc.
I just want to ask one specific question. Is this coming directly from Councillor Bartow, or is it coming from the Economic Development Committee?
I believe it's coming from Councillor Bartow.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Can I mention that, I guess, just to kick it off, it can evolve into the committee or staff or whatever as we see fit. But for now, it's directly from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else before we go in camera? Councillor Longmire.
Thanks, Warden. I just wanted to recognize International Women's Day. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I'll ask for a motion to go in camera with respect to the three sections of the subsections of section 22 of the Municipal Government Act, contract
Go in camera.
negotiations, litigation, and personnel. Would someone make that motion? Deputy
Move to
Warden
go in
moves, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. Is there any discussion on the motion to go in camera with respect to those issues?
Just for clarity, that is to meet in camera in accordance with 22(2)C personnel, E contract negotiations, and F litigation or potential litigation of the municipal government.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. We're now complete. We have completed the in-camera portion of our meeting today. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Moved by the Deputy Warden, seconded by Councillor Longmire. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.